What's up guys, my name is Abdul Nafe and welcome to this course. If you want to learn Blender 3D, then you are at the perfect place, because in this course I'm going to be showing you the basics of Blender 3D, and after that we're going to be diving into a wide range of projects. We're going to do more than 15 projects in this course and you're going to learn a lot. And not only that, after this course you're going to have an amazing portfolio to show to clients and get freelance projects. Right, so without any further ado, I'm going to show you all the projects that we're going to be working on. So I'm in this folder right now and you're going to see all the projects which we're going to do. And so firstly, we're going to be making this simple cartoon character. Basically, we're going to start with this because we want to sort of learn the basics of modeling, how to sort of model different sorts of shapes and stuff like that, right? Then we're also going to be texturing this. We're going to be adding the materials. And then we're going to be lighting this and rendering this all inside of Blender 3D. After that, we're going to be making this cartoon character right here. This is going to show you how to use the subdivision surface modifier and how to sort of make simple characters inside of Blender 3D. We're going to be modeling this ourselves. We're going to be adding the materials and then we're going to be lighting this. And then we're going to be diving into a project which is going to be about architecture visualization. We're going to be creating a whole apartment. So this is the living room of that apartment. This is the kitchen of that apartment. And this is the bedroom and this is the bathroom. So we're going to be doing all these inside of Blender 3D. We're going to be creating this whole apartment. We're going to be lighting it. We're going to be you can see it looks very realistic, doesn't it? And we're going to be doing all this architecture visualization inside of Blender 3D. So if you want to do that, if you want to learn that, then this course is perfect for you. After that, we're also going to be doing this kitchen project in which we're going to learn how to sort of model basic furniture and how to create architecture visualization scenes, just to give you some more practice. And for some more practice after that, we're also going to be making this scene right here. This is a bedroom scene, and in this project we're going to be talking about some different lighting techniques, and hopefully you will learn a lot in this project. After that, we're going to be learning how to light products, right? How to make product visualization renders, but this tutorial is going to be focused on lighting, on the lighting part, right? We're going to be taking this model from the internet and then we're going to be lighting this completely by ourselves. I'm going to show you what a key light is, what a fill light is, what a rim light is, and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to cover the lighting part of Blender 3D in this course. And then we're going to be doing a few projects related to product visualization. So we're going to be modeling this perfume by ourselves. Then we're going to be lighting this, adding the textures and all that inside of Blender. After that, we're going to be modeling these headphones. So in this project, we're also going to be learning how to model a little more complex shapes, because you can see this is a little more complex than the perfume model. So once we're done with this, we're going to move on to this watch. Again, this watch is a relatively more complex item. So I'm going to be showing you how to model this from scratch. And after that, we're also going to be doing some more modeling. And this time we're going to be modeling this cartoon style truck. You can also make a realistic truck if you want, but I think for beginners, this is a cartoon style truck is much easier to make. So we're going to be doing this. And after that, we are going to be making this animation. So we're not going to be modeling this car by ourselves. We're going to be using a pre-made model. However, in this, I'm going to be introducing you to animation tools in Blender 3D. And we're going to be making this whole garage animation of this McLaren inside Blender 3D. After that, we're going to be making this vintage car animation. And again, in this, we're going to be making a whole studio out of this. We're going to be learning how to sort of light your whole studio, how to use planes as lighting objects. And then we're going to be making this whole animation. After that, we're going to be rendering this outdoor car in nighttime. So in this, again, we're going to be learning the lighting techniques which we use to sort of get reflections on your cars. For example, in this, you can see that on the side, the lighting is blue, and in this side, the lighting is sort of red. So how to create contrast in your images and how to make your images look attractive and very realistic. This is another render of that same exact scene. So we're going to be making this as well. All right, so after that, we're going to be making these VFX renders. So this is the first one. You can see that this robot, spider robot, is actually fake. Everything else is real. It's a real video and we've composited it on top of that. After that, we're going to be making this VFX scene. So in this scene, everything is real except for this laptop. This laptop is actually completely 3D. It's completely fake. Also, that Rubik's Cube as well. That Rubik's Cube was also fake. So if you weren't able to tell that, then that's perfectly the point. So yeah, we're going to be learning how to make this as well. And then we're going to be finishing this course off with this amazing typography, 3D typography. And this is useful if you want to make, I don't know, posters or something like that. So you can make this as well, right? So those are all the projects for now. I will be sure to keep updating this course, and I will be sure to keep adding new projects to this course as time goes on. But for now, you are learning a lot. The value you're getting from this course is absolutely insane. So yeah, just enroll now and I will see you in course. Thank you. All right, guys, welcome to the course. And so firstly, obviously, we're going to have to download Blender 3D. And so for that, you're just going to go to blender.org, or you can just simply search Blender on the internet, and then it's going to come up, blender.org. Go to this website and just download the latest Blender version. Right now, it's 3.6. So I'm just going to click download, and then it's going to start downloading. Now I already have it downloading down there, so I'm just going to cancel this new download. Or if your screen looks like this, just click download, and then it's gonna take you to that website. Now, this is for people who have good computers. Your computer has a graphic card and your CPU is good, and mainly your graphic card is good, right? At least an NVIDIA 20 series graphic card, or maybe a 1650 at least, right? If you don't have that, if you have integrated graphics, or if you have a lower end PC, what you can do is you can simply search for Blender.2.81. Just search that and go to this website. Now, this version does have a little some fewer features. It doesn't have geometry nodes, and I think that's pretty much it. That's mainly that's the only major thing that it's lacking. But everything else is pretty much the same, and it renders faster. It's generally a little faster on slower PCs. So you don't have to click this, because if you do, it's going to take you to that same website, Blender 3.6. That's not what we're trying to download. You're going to click this thing right here, Blender 2.83 LTS, long-term support, and then just click this button right here. Go down and just click, if you have Mac OS, then click Mac OS. If you have Linux, click Linux, but I'm gonna click on Windows because I have Windows, right? So it's gonna start downloading. I'm not gonna download that again because I already do have this downloading. So I'll see when this has completed downloading, and then we will start with Blender. Now, the reason why I'm downloading a fresh copy of Blender, even though I have it already, is because I have a lot of add-ons installed, and so I want to sort of show you guys how to install those add-ons first, and how to sort of set up your Blender, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be everything is set up in my own Blender, right? So that's not and that's not going to be that might be a little confusing for you guys. But yeah, while this is downloading, you can also go ahead and download the BlenderKit add-on. Just search for BlenderKit. This is an add-on which we're going to be using, so just search for it on the internet. Just go to this first link right here. Don't click on the sponsored links. A lot of the times now, right now, I think it's probably the genuine website. However, a lot of times what happens is that sponsored links are scams. I don't know why that is, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So just go to blenderkit.com and click download BlenderKit, and then just click download right here, and it's going to download as a zip file. And it's also showing you instructions on how to install it, but we're going to be doing that together. So just click download right here, and I will see you when these add-ons have completed installing. All right, so now Blender has been downloaded. So I'm just going to be opening this, and the installer should look the same regardless of the version that you download. But we're going to be installing Blender 3.6. Right, so just click next and then accept the license agreement. And I'm just going to be clicking next because I have my SSD in C drive. So it is generally recommended to just download Blender if you have an SSD in that SSD, because it's obviously going to be faster. So I'm just going to do next, install, and yeah, it's just as straightforward as that. Yeah, there's really not much to it, to be honest. I'm just going to wait for it to complete installing, and I'll see you then. All right, so Blender has been installed. Just click finish. Let's go to our start menu, and it should come up here, but it does not for some reason. So I'm just going to be opening Blender 3.6. And so when you open Blender for the first time, it's going to look something like this, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set the language to English, obviously, and the shortcuts, just set it to Blender. And yeah, everything seems to be nice. Just save new settings, and now it's going to, something like this is going to pop up. So generally what I like to do is just like to click off it, and it's just going to, sort of that menu is just going to open, just going to close, right? I'm going to be showing you around the basics of the UI of Blender. So firstly, this thing right here, this whole thing right here is called the viewport, right? And this thing down here is called the timeline. You can go forward in the timeline, or backwards. This is especially useful when you're making animations, because obviously you're gonna have to have a timeline if you're making animations, right? That's basically the same in every other software, every other animation software, right? Right here you have this thing which is called the outliner. So basically this outliner right here, the job of this outliner here is to sort of essentially just show all the objects that you have in your scene right now. So we have a camera, this is the camera, we have this cube right here, this is the cube, and then we have this light, this is the light right there, right? So you basically have everything which you have in your scene in this outliner. This is just so that you can organize your things and you can select the things which you have in your scene, right? And down here we have this whole menu. This whole menu is essentially comprised of a lot of things, right, which you can sort of tweak. This is the render settings, this is the output settings, this is the world settings, this is the light settings, and basically you have a lot of settings. We're going to dive deep into these later on. Right now these might seem a little confusing, but just don't worry about that. Okay, so let's just start with how to sort of move your camera, right? Also, these right here are basically your movement tools, right? This is the move tool, this is the rotate tool, the scale tool, and the transform tool. This comes with basically all the other settings as well, right? And this is just a select box tool, which is just used to sort of select things. I just like to use this tool when I'm working in Blender. And up here you have all the layouts which you can use for different purposes. I basically use pretty much all the time. I just use the layout mode. Sometimes I use the UV editing mode, sometimes the shading mode, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I do the animation and stuff like that in the layout viewport. However, it comes down to personal preference. If you really want to go to the animation viewport, then you can go there as well. And then geometry nodes are used. However, those are not going to be covered in this course as of yet, because they are quite advanced. And I just want this tutorial to be more focused towards beginners, right? So let's start with how to sort of move around your viewport. You can use your scroll wheel to sort of zoom in and zoom out, right? That is pretty basic. And then what you can do is you can hold your middle mouse button, and then if you hold your middle mouse button and you move your mouse, you're going to see that we can actually orbit around the object, right? Alternatively, what you can do is that if you don't have a middle mouse button, or for example, if you're on a laptop, what you can do is you can go to edit, go to preferences, and then in here, you're going to see that you can just go to input and then just click emulate 3 mouse button. Now, if I just close this out, now what's going to happen is that if I hold Alt on my keyboard, I'm holding Alt on my keyboard, by the way. And then if I left click, just use my normal left click, and then I can just do that same exact thing with this as well. I can also do it with the middle mouse button, and I can also do that same exact thing while holding Alt on my keyboard and left clicking, right? Now, one thing which I'm going to do is that I'm going to be basically installing an add-on, which is going to be useful for you guys to sort of see which buttons I'm clicking, right? Because right now, if I'm pressing Alt on my keyboard, you're really not seeing that. It's going to be confusing when we move later on, right? So I'm just going to be installing that add-on. It might seem a little confusing how exactly we install an add-on, but just don't worry about that. I am going to be showing you how to install other add-ons as well later on, but right now just bear with me. So firstly, we just go to Edit, Preferences, and again, we go to Add-ons, and then just click Install. And I already do have this add-on downloaded. It's basically called the Shortcut VUR Master. So I'm just going to be installing this, and then just turn this on, right? So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go and click this button right here. If you don't understand this, if you don't understand what's going on, that's completely fine. I'm just doing this so that I can show you guys which buttons I'm clicking. I'm just going to go to this add-on and click Start Shortcut VUR. Now what's going to happen is that if I click my left mouse button, you're going to see it right here. I'm just going to increase my this offset so that you guys can see it more clearly. Now if I press Alt on my keyboard, you're going to see that for some reason it's not working. Okay, so the keyboard is working. However, I'm not really seeing. Okay, basically what's happening is that when I press Alt on my keyboard, and if I move it around, you're going to see that it's going to show it as the middle mouse button, because that's obviously the Blender is obviously emulating that, right? So if I just press, let's say F3 on this on my keyboard, you're going to see that it's going to show it right here. So you guys can just rest assured that even if I don't say which button I'm pressing, you can just look down there. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. Let me just close this menu so that it doesn't confuse you guys. Right, so basically that's how you can move around your viewport. You can just orbit around your object, right? You can zoom in, zoom out, and then if you want to sort of pan, what you can do is you can hold Alt and Shift on your keyboard, and then you can move around, right? Alternatively, what you can do is you can press Shift on your keyboard and then use your middle mouse button to move around, right? So that's how you pan around your object. Now, one thing which you might be noticing is that right now we're essentially orbiting around this cube, right? What if we want to orbit around this camera? How can we do that? We can simply hold Alt on our keyboard and then press with the middle mouse button. And what's going to happen is that it's going to set our orbiting center to that exact point. That's how you can orbit around different objects. Let's say I want to orbit around that light. I just select that, press my press Alt on my keyboard, and then press my middle mouse button, and it's going to set our orbit center. Similarly, with the cube, if I set it back to the cube, you're going to see that it's going to be like that. So that's how you move in Blender. It's very, very simple. There's really not much to it. You just you will need to sort of get used to these controls, especially if you're coming from another software. You are going to need some getting used to. However, once you get used to it, other controls are going to feel very, very weird. Anyways, so let's actually learn how to move these objects. And this, by the way, here is called a mesh. So whenever I say mesh, I basically mean an object, right? This is not a mesh, this is not a mesh. This, however, is a mesh, right? Because it's an actual 3D object. So if you want to move this object, what you can do is you can just simply select the object first, go to the move tool, and now you're going to see that you can just move this along all the axes that you want to move it. I am pressing Ctrl Z on my keyboard, by the way, just so that I can undo it. You can move it on the x-axis. The red one, by the way, is the x-axis. The green one is the y-axis, and the blue one is the z-axis. You can see these axes up here, by the way. You can even use this to move. You can just click anywhere here, and then you can just move your left mouse button, and it's gonna sort of just move you around in your viewport, right? So next, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be rotating this. So just go to the rotate tool, and again, you can rotate it in the y-axis, the x-axis and the z-axis, right? And if you just click anywhere else apart from these axes, then you can just rotate it in any axis you want. However, that is generally not recommended because it really doesn't give you accurate results. It's pretty much random, so I would not recommend you to do that. Also, in your move tool, if you want to move it in two specific axes, what you can do is you can just simply click these cubes these squares right here. So if I just click this square, you're going to see that it's going to move it in the z-axis and the y-axis like that. However, the x-axis is staying the same like that. And if I want to move it in the y-axis and the x-axis, I can just do this, and it's as simple as that, right? Let's move on to the scale tool. So the scale tool is as simple as it sounds. You can just scale it in any axis you want, just like that, right? And so there's that. Now I'm going to be showing you shortcuts for all this. Obviously, we're not going to be using these tools because they are very slow. Using the tools is very slow. I am going to be showing you shortcuts because they are much, much faster. So for the move tool, you have a shortcut which is called G, right? So if you press the G button on your keyboard, you can just move it anywhere you want. And after that, after pressing G, if you press Y on your keyboard, it's going to lock it to the Y axis. If you press X on your keyboard, it's going to lock it to the X axis. And if you press Z on your keyboard, it's going to lock it to the Z axis. And if you left click, it's going to leave it right there. I'm going to undo this. And if you, instead of left clicking, if you press the right click button, it's going to reset it back to where it was previously, right? So that's pretty simple. I think I really hope you do understand this. It might seem a little difficult at first, and if you go to my very old tutorials, I actually used to use these tools because I thought they were much easier. However, once I sort of got used to using the G key, I think now I just can't go back, and it's much, much faster. Similarly, if you want to rotate it, you can just press R on your keyboard and it's going to rotate it like that. And if I press X, it's going to rotate it in the X axis, Y axis, and Z axis. Right click to reset it, or you can left click to just set it on that rotation. And if you want to scale it up, you can just press S, and it's going to scale it up uniformly. And if you don't want to scale it up uniformly, you can just rotate. You can just press Y on your keyboard to scale it up in the Y axis, X in the X axis, and Z in the Z axis. Right? Now, what if you want to sort of move it in, let's say, the Z axis and the Y axis? For example, you could just click here, click on this square right here, and you move it right there, right? So how exactly do you move it in two axes without having to use the move tool? What you can do is that you can press G on your keyboard, and now it's going to start moving. And now what I'm going to do is that if I want to move it in the Y axis and the X axis, for example, what I'm going to do is that the other axis remaining is called the Z axis, right? So I'm just going to press Shift and Z on my keyboard. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to move it in both the other axes except for the Z axis, right? I really hope that makes sense. I'm going to right click, and now let's press G, and let's this time press Shift X. So now it's going to rotate it, it's going to move it in the Y axis and the Z axis, but not in the X axis. So it's as simple as that. And similarly with the other things as well. So if I want to rotate it in, I don't know, the X axis and the Y axis like that. And so I'm just going to press Shift Z to do that. If I want to scale it up in the X axis and the Y axis, I'm going to press Shift Z, and it's going to scale it up like that. So it's as simple as that. So those are basically the basic movement tools. I really hope you do understand them. You can also use this transform tool if you want. This basically comes with all the options. You can move it, you can rotate it, and you can scale it up in the same tool. However, I generally don't use it at all. I just use this. I just use the shortcuts. I think those are much faster, and you can move anything using these shortcuts as well. You can just move this camera as well. Just press G and move it around. Right click to reset it, and left click to just leave it where it is. You can move the lights as well using these controls, and it's as simple as that, right? So once you're comfortable, I would definitely recommend you to sort of get comfortable with these controls. Just practice around and just move the cube, just rotate your camera, just move it around, just sort of practice. And once you feel like you're comfortable with the movement tools, let's move on to the next thing. All right, so now let's go on to the next step, which is going to be adding objects, adding different sorts of objects and making new models from them, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be just selecting all these, and I'm going to be pressing delete on my keyboard. You can also press, I think, X on your keyboard and then press OK. So that's going to delete them as well. And now you're going to see they actually disappear in our outliner, because your outliner only shows the things which are visible in your viewport, right? So I'm going to go to add up there, and in add you have a lot of these options, right? And so what we want is that we want to add a mesh, right? Remember when I told you that a cube was a mesh, right? So we're going to be adding a mesh, and then we have a lot of these options, right? You can add a cube, you can add a circle, you can add a UV sphere, and all these other options. So let's go ahead and add a cylinder, right? You're going to see that we have a cylinder in our viewport, right? You can press Alt and middle mouse button to sort of make it your center point, right? And so now what we can do is that we can actually add different objects and make random things from it. So let's go ahead and actually make like a perfume, right? So I'm just going to be deleting this. Let's go ahead and add like a cube, right? And let's go ahead and add a cylinder. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be pressing S, scaling it down like that. And let's press G and Z on my keyboard so that we can move it up like that. So I think this is a basic perfume. You can obviously it doesn't look that good, but we are going to be covering modifiers and how to sort of make your things look better with modifiers later on, not right now. But yeah, also if you are noticing the fact that this cylinder is not actually smooth, it has the jagged edges. So if you don't want that, what you can do is you can right click that object and just shade it smooth. However, right now you're going to see that it looks absolutely terrible because the shading is very messed up. So what you can do is that you can just select this, right? And then what you can do is you can go down to your object data properties, go down to normals, and then just click auto smooth. Now I'm not going to explain how exactly this works, however, because it's a little too advanced. However, I just want you guys to know that you can shade your object smooth using this way. You can also increase the segments that your object has, and you can do that by simply, let me just go ahead and delete these. Instead of deleting them, what we can do is we can also hide them. So if you just go to your outliner and you just click this I button right here, you're going to see that it's going to actually hide it. Let's hide this as well. Let's go ahead and add a mesh, which is going to be a cylinder, right? So I want you guys to not click anywhere else. You're going to see this option right here, this menu. If I just click this, you're going to see that it's going to open up. Now, if you click anywhere else, this is going to disappear and there's no way to actually get it back. But yeah, you're going to see that the vertices are 32, the radius is 1 meter, the depth is 2 meters. So what you can do is you can actually increase the vertices and it's going to make it smoother, right? So if I just set it to something like 150, you're going to see now it's going to be extremely smooth, right? It's not that smooth, but you can just go ahead and make it something like 300. But do note that this is generally not recommended at all, because right now what's happening is that there are a lot of these vertices in our scene, and the more vertices you have, the slower Blender is going to become and the more time it's going to take to render, and your PC can also crash as well. So I would recommend you to just keep your vertices as low as you can and then use Shade Smooth to make your things look smoother. And you can also control the radius and depth. Basically, you can sort of control anything regarding the size and the location and stuff like that when you add a new object, right? So I'm just going to be deleting this because that's all I wanted to show you guys. And so we have this perfume now. And so I'm just going to be showing you how to sort of edit this shape into something which is a little better, right? So I'm going to be introducing you to the edit mode. Now, what exactly is the edit mode? Right now we're inside the object mode, right? So you can see object mode right here. Now, if I just select the cube and if I click right here and if I go to edit mode, you're going to see that we have a lot of these options right here. We're not going to be covering any of these right now, but I'm just going to go to edit mode. Now you're going to see that we have some more tools right here. Don't worry about them. They might look a little intimidating, but don't worry about that. And now what's going to happen is that we're actually going to be seeing the vertices of our object as well. And we can select vertices as well. So originally, all the vertices were selected. We can press A, by the way, to select all the vertices. However, if you click away, you're going to see that we can see all the vertices, but none of them are selected. So what we can do is we can actually select these individual vertices and we can move them around using the same exact tools, movement tools and everything else which we learned so far. So I'm just going to press G and Z. Let's move it down, something like that. And now you're going to see that we have this weird looking shape. So you can essentially just create anything in Blender, right? And so you can also go to the face select mode or the edge select mode as well. Right now we're inside the vertex select mode. I think that's what it's called. The plural of that is vertices, but the singular is vertex, not vertice. I've heard some people say vertice, and it's just really weird. Anyway, so you can just go up here and you can click this button right here, which is the edge select mode. Now it's gonna only select edges. So you can just select one edge, just move it right there, something like that, and cheesy. And you can even sort of move it around anywhere you want. You can basically do whatever you want with these. And yeah, so that's the edge select mode. And then you go to the face select mode, and now you can select faces and you can maybe scale them down, something like that. And you can even move them around and just do whatever you want, right? So those are the tools which you can use to sort of modify your object, right? So now what I'm going to do right now, what I'm actually trying to do is that let's go out of the edit mode back to the object mode. One way to do it is simply just click right there and go to object mode. Another way, a faster way, a shortcut for that is to just press tab on your keyboard and it's going to go back to object mode. If I press tab again, it's going to switch back to the edit mode. And if I press tab, you're going to see that we're going to come back to the object mode. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select this cube. I'm going to press S and X, scale it down, something like that. And so I think that is a better perfume. However, I want to make some tweaks to this. So I'm just going to be selecting this. I'm going to press tab on my keyboard. Let's select the bottom face and let's actually make it smaller. Something like that. I think that is a much better perfume design. Let's get out of edit mode and now let's tweak this thing right here because the cap is way too large for now. So just scale it down, something like that, and then place it right there. So I think that is a much better perfume design. You can even sort of go back to the edit mode and just bring this up, GZ. So that's how modeling works, right? You can, obviously right now we're just doing extremely basic modeling. We are gonna learn how to use modifiers and different tools and stuff like that later on. However, right now I just wanna keep this very basic and we've just created this perfume bottle for us, right? So right now let's go back to the edit mode and I'm going to be showing you some tricks and some sort of basic tools which we can use to sort of model things, right? So the first one which we're going to be learning is loop cuts. Right now what's happening is that we only have the edges, the lines where the object is sort of basically changing, right? So for example, right here we have this face and then we have an edge and then we have a different face, right? However, you can add any sorts of, you can add these lines, these loop cuts anywhere you want. And the way you do that is by holding Control on your keyboard and pressing R. So if you press Control R, you're going to see that if I hover over my object, you're going to see that we're actually going to have these sort of lines across our object. So if I just press it right here, or if I just come right here, and if I just left click right here, you're going to see that now we're going to actually create a loop cut and we can actually move it along the object as well. So if I just place it something like that, somewhere like there, what's going to happen is that it's essentially going to be creating another line for us. And now what we can do is we can simply just make any adjustments which we usually would. So I'm just going to be selecting, let's select the edge mode, and let's just select the bottom edge. Let's move it forward, GZ, something like that. So you can just create something like that if you want. And I know it looks very weird, but yeah, that's what you can do. And you can even select an edge, maybe go to face select mode and just bring it forward or something like that. GX, something like that. You can do basically whatever you want, right? So that's how loop cuts work. You can add more as well if you want. So I'm just going to be adding one right there, and we can maybe add one right there as well. And then what we can do is we can select this face and GZ, just move it out in the x-axis, sorry, GX, my bad, not GZ. And you have created a shape like this. Now, I don't know why you would want to do that, but yeah, you can do that, right? One thing which I'm going to show you right now is what if we sort of want to move this ahead. However, we only want this face to move ahead, nothing else. Because right now, if I just press G and X, you can see that these faces are coming along with it as well. What if I just want to extrude this out? And we have an exact command for that. You can just press E on your keyboard, and then you can bring it out. Now you're going to see that it's going to extrude out, right? So that's an option which you have as well. And yeah, so that's extrude as well. Now, if I want to sort of make this face smaller and then I want to extrude it out, what I can do is I can insert this face. Now I'm going to press I on my keyboard and I'm going to be inserting it in like that. And I can press E again to extrude it out. So those are basically those are the very basic modeling tools which you can use in your modeling. Now, obviously this looks like an absolute mess. So I'm just going to undo that. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show you guys. I just wanted to show you guys two main sort of edit mode tools which we're going to be using quite often. One of them is inset, which just sort of creates a smaller shape out of your actual shape. And the second one is extrude, which is just used by pressing E, right? And then you can, once you extrude it, by the way, you can also just, right now it's locked to the Z axis, but if I press X, you're going to see that it's only going to be extruding in the X axis. If I press Y, that doesn't make sense, but yeah, it's going to be only extruding in the Y axis, and Z is Z axis as well. Right now, the only thing that makes sense is the X axis. So what you can do is you can just extrude it like that if you want. And once you've extruded it out, you can also just make any sort of adjustments that you want. So I'm just going to be bringing it down. So I think something like that should look good. If I go out of my edit mode, you're going to see that we have this sort of label which is protruding out of our perfume bottle. But yeah, that's how you can use the extrude tool and the insert tool. All right, so now you know the very basics of Blender modeling. Another thing which I'm going to be introducing to you guys is going to be the bevel tool. So basically right now you're going to see that the edges of this model are very sharp, right? The edges have no smoothing to them. They're just very sharp edges. And in real life, nothing is perfectly sharp, is it? Everything is slightly smooth, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press tab to go inside of edit mode. And now what you can do is you can just basically select the edges. So you can just select this edge. Let me first go to the edge select mode, by the way. Select this edge and press shift on your keyboard to select multiple edges. And I'm going to click that, hold shift on your keyboard, by the way. And I'm just going to be selecting all the edges, which are going to be the actual edges of this bottle. And so I'm not going to be selecting the edges which are inside the bottle. So just go ahead and select them. Alternatively, what you can do is either you can basically select them individually, or you can, I'm just going to be selecting them right now. And then after that, let me show you another method, because right now if I do that, it's going to deselect all the edges which I've already selected, and I don't want to do that. Right, so all the edges of this, what do you call it, bottle have been selected. And now what I can do is I can press Ctrl B on my keyboard, and I'm going to see if I just move my mouse, you're going to see that it's going to make them smooth, right? However, the segments of the smoothness are not very much, right? It's just adding one more segment. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be scrolling up on my mouse scroll wheel, and as I scroll up, you're going to see that it's going to add more and more segments, right? So I can just increase it, something like that, or I can decrease it and make it very sharp, however a little smoother. So if I left click right there, you're going to see that it's going to bevel. Now you can just increase the bevel, and you can control everything from there. However, I'm just going to do it once again, and you can control the segments using the mouse scroll wheel. That's the main thing to note. I think something like that should be good. If I press tab, you're going to see that now it is smooth. However, the problem that we're facing right now is that if I go to this edge, you're going to see that the bevel isn't really looking that good, is it? It's looking very weird. And so from this side, it is more beveled as compared to this side, right? From these sides, it's less beveled, right? So what we can do to sort of fix that is I'm just going to press Ctrl Z and undo this. Let's tab out of edit mode. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Ctrl A. And usually Ctrl A selects everything in various softwares. However, in this software, in Blender, we're pressing A selects everything. Pressing Ctrl A basically opens up this menu, which is basically called the apply menu. And what you can do is you can just apply all transforms. Now, why exactly do we need to do this? I won't go into too much detail. However, you just need to do this in order to sort of make any adjustments inside of edit mode, and in order to make sure that your bevel modifier applies correctly. Now, if I just go to edit mode by pressing tab, and I'm going to make sure that all my edges are already selected. This one is not. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And yeah, now let's press Ctrl B. Let's increase it a little bit. And this time, if I just tab out of edit mode, you're going to see that our edges are perfectly beveled, are equally beveled from all sides. But still, we can actually see the segment. So I'm just going to right click this and shade smooth. So now you're going to see it looks very, very bad because obviously we don't have auto smooth turned on. So I'm just going to go to the normal, this option right here, this green triangle thing right here, go in normals and click auto smooth. And now you're going to see that it's going to smooth it out very well. Perfect. So that's how you smooth things out in Blender. However, now I'm going to segue into basically another thing, which is called the modifiers. Now, this is one way of beveling things, right? I just pressed tab, by the way. So this is one way of beveling things. However, if I want to sort of increase the bevel, right, how exactly am I going to increase the bevel? Because if I press Ctrl B once again, it's going to bevel it once again, and that's going to create a mess, right? Exactly. We don't really want to do that. So there's basically no way, at least that I know of, to sort of bevel this more, right? So if you want to bevel it in such a way that you can control it later on, you can basically modify it later on, then you're going to have to use the bevel modifier, not the bevel tool. So I'm just going to press Ctrl Z on my keyboard a few times so that I can basically undo the bevel. And now let's go ahead and add the bevel modifier. That's going to do exactly the same thing. However, it's going to be changeable in the future, right? So I'm just going to select this object, right? And make sure that you're in object mode. It does work in edit mode as well, but just to avoid any confusions, let's stay in object mode. And with the selected, I'm going to go into this menu. And in this menu, you have a lot of these options. So I'm just going to click this thing right here, which says modifiers. It's basically a wrench. I think it's called a wrench. Anyway, so you go inside this modifier menu, and then you click this button right here, which says add modifier. And now you have a lot of these modifiers, right? And all these modifiers, essentially what they do is that they change your mesh in some way, in one way or another. So right now what we want is we want the bevel modifier. So I'm just going to click this thing right here. And now you're going to see that it has beveled it. But if I go into edit mode, if I tab into edit mode, you're going to see that we don't really have that edge, do we? So this is basically not actually changing the mesh, right? However, it is just showing us as the change the mesh, right? And we can apply the bevel modifier, and then it's going to do exactly what you want. It's basically going to apply it. However, for now, I'm not going to do that. So you can just control the amount, something like that. Right now, you're going to see that the changes are way too minor. So it's not really making that much of a difference. I think something like that is good. And now we can increase the segments as well. So basically all the things which we were doing previously in the using the bevel modifier, we can do them right now as well, right? And also we can right click shade smooth this, make sure that auto smooth is turned on. It's just going to make your shading a little better. Now, if let's say you want to sort of apply these changes and actually want to have them show up as an actual mesh, what you can do is that right now you can just go ahead and click this drop down menu right here and click apply. Now do note that once you apply a modifier, you can't actually go ahead and change it because it is actually applied as a regular mesh, right? Usually we don't want to do this a lot of times. However, sometimes we do want to do this in very specific situations. We want to apply modifiers in very specific situations. However, most of the time, the only point of using modifiers instead of actually going and changing your mesh yourself is so that you can actually change you could sort of modify the properties of that modifier later on, if that makes sense, right? We can obviously change the bevel amount anytime we want. So that's the main reason why we're doing this. Right, so to sort of use modifiers in a way, I'm going to be showing you how to create a Rubik's Cube, right? Let's do a Rubik's Cube project real quick. And in that, I'm going to be showing you the bevel modifier and another modifier, which is called the array modifier. That is something similar to the bevel modifier. However, it's a little different as well, right? And we also have the mirror modifier. We're going to be using some of these modifiers in the future in this project, right? So I'm just going to be selecting the whole object and deleting it. Press Ctrl S on your keyboard, by the way. Just keep saving if you are following along. And now what I'm going to do is that firstly, I'm just going to go ahead and go to add, mesh, and then cube. So basically we want to make a Rubik's Cube, right? And so once we have this cube, what I'm going to do is that I can actually just go ahead and scale it down. However, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press S on my keyboard. Right now, you're going to see that it doesn't snap to any axis, right? But if I hold Control on my keyboard, it's going to snap to the grid, which is exactly what I want. So I think something like that should be a good scale. I'm going to left click right there. So that's going to be one block of my Rubik's Cube, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the array modifier to create multiple of these. But first, let me just go ahead and add a bevel modifier on this. So I'm just going to make sure that my cube is selected. Let's go to add modifier. Let's go to bevel modifier. And then this is a little too much maybe, so we can maybe just go ahead and reduce it, something like that. 0.07 seems to be good. And then I'm going to be increasing the segments to something like 5. I think 5 should be enough. Maybe something like 6 is good. Yeah, so let's do that. All right. Now we want a lot of these, right? So what we can do is either we can just copy them, right? And we can basically, the way you duplicate things in Blender 3D is by pressing Shift and D. So if I press Shift and D, you're going to see that we have another cube. Now, obviously, I want to move it specifically in the y-axis only. So I'm just going to press Y on my keyboard, and then it's going to lock to the y-axis. And so I'm just going to be placing it something like that. You're going to have to eyeball this, make sure that it is equidistant, right? And then just do it again, Shift D, Y. Now, this method is very bad, and you never want to do this unless you really want to. However, the main method that we use is going to be to use an array modifier. Now, once you have this bevel modifier, I'm just going to click this arrow right here, which is going to close it out. So it's basically just going to hide it to hide the settings, just to make things a little more efficient, not efficient, a little more organized, right? So I'm just going to go to add modifier. Let's add an array modifier. If I do that, you're going to see that we automatically have another cube, right? So what this does is that it basically creates an array of the object that you select. So if I increase the count, you're going to see that we're going to have a lot of these cubes, right? So right now I want 3 of them, and with these settings, basically what you can do is you can control the distance between them. So right now, the factor x, which means the distance between each of the objects, is going to be just one. Basically, it's going to be one length of the cube, right? So if I just make it something like 1.1, you're going to see that they're going to move basically 1.1 times the length of this object, right? You can also turn off relative offset, and you can turn on a constant offset. So that's something, if that's something you want, and then you can just specify the distance that you want them to be apart. But I usually don't do that. I usually just use a relative offset. And so in this scene, we just want to have a relative offset of 1, and that's perfectly fine, right? So also right now it's basically adding more objects in the x-axis. And if we don't want that, if for example we want to add more objects in the y-axis, what we can do is we can select it and make the factor x to be 0 and the factor y to be 1. So that's just gonna add the objects in the y-axis. So that's exactly what you want to do, right? Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding another array modifier on top of it, because if you know what a Rubik's Cube is, you would know that it is basically a 3 by 3 array, right? So it's basically a 3 by 3 by 3 3D array of cubes, right? So I'm just going to be collapsing this array modifier just to make things a little easier to see. And let's add another array modifier. This time the factor x is perfectly fine. We basically want it to be an x factor of 1 cube, right? I'm just going to be increasing the count, something like that. So there is that. And now what we can do is with that, we can actually go ahead and add another array modifier. This time we're going to be adding the array modifier, and the factor x is going to be 0. The factor z this time is going to have to be 1, because obviously we want to build it up, right? And 3. So there we have it. We have the Rubik's Cube, and it's basically ready. Right, so basically our Rubik's Cube is pretty much done. And now we have to obviously create the colors on top of it. So let's go ahead and do that. But first, make sure that your segments are fine. So also right now, you're going to see that this is essentially one object. And if I go into edit mode, you're going to see that all of these actually don't have any geometry. All of these don't exist pretty much in the edit mode. The only geometry that our edit mode is seeing is this actual cube. If I go ahead and apply these modifiers, then you're going to see that they're actually going to come as separate objects in the edit mode, right? So there's that. But I'm not going to do that because we don't really need to apply anything. Also, if you want to see through an object, the way you can do that is by pressing Alt Z on your keyboard. So that way things just become a little translucent so that you can just see through them. This is useful in a lot of cases. Obviously, you might not be aware of any cases, but right now, however, in the future, you will definitely come across cases where you would want to do that, right? Also, instead of doing that, you can also click this button right here, and it's gonna take you into that X-ray mode, right? I'm not going to be talking about these things right here. This is basically the material preview mode. This is basically the render viewport mode. So we're going to cover them later on when we're doing lighting and texturing. But for right now, our Rubik's Cube is ready. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and add the colors on top of it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using a very similar technique, but this time I'm going to be using a plane, right? So I'm just going to go to add. Let's go ahead and add a plane. So a plane is basically a 2D object which has a height of 0 and basically the size of whatever you want it to be. So I'm just going to be scaling it down, something like that. And that should be a good position. Something like that should be a good position for our scale. I'm just going to be moving it up, press GZ, bring it up like that. And I'm going to select it, move it up slightly. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going to the front view mode. And the way you do that is by holding Alt on your keyboard and then basically clicking your middle mouse button and then moving it. Right? If I move it like that, you're going to see that we're going to go into this viewport mode. Now, if I hold my Alt mouse button, on my keyboard once again, and if I press my middle mouse button and move, you're going to see that it's going to change the viewport, change the direction of the view, right? This is basically orthographic mode also. And so I'm just going to be selecting the plane. Let's press GZ. Let's place it somewhere there, just so that it is slightly above the cube, but not too much. So that's perfect. Now I can just go ahead and apply a bevel modifier to this as well. Bevel modifier. And so hopefully it should add curves around the edges. So it is not doing that for some reason. And the reason why it's not doing that is because the mode right now is set to edges. So if I set it to vertices, you're going to see that now it has beveled it completely. I'm just going to be reducing it. That it had basically reached the maximum level of beveling which was allowed. However, something like that should be a good amount of beveling. I am going to add segments to make it smooth. So something like 10 segments should be good. And yeah, that is a really good color. I mean, basically a very good, what do you call it? Color label, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, so I think that should be good. So now let's just go ahead and apply an array modifier to this. So I'm just going to be going to add modifier, array modifier. And this time the offset is going to be not 1. It is going to be more than 1. So let's just increase it until it looks good. Maybe 1.25, I think. Yeah, I think 1.25 seems to be perfect. So I'm going to be increasing the count to 3, and after that I'm going to be adding another array modifier to this. Array modifier, this time the factor x is going to be 0. However, the factor y is going to be 1, actually 1.25, because it was that. And increase the count to 3, and now we have the top side completed. Now what you can do is you can either just go ahead and duplicate this. So I'm just going to go here, and then you can press Shift D, right? Press GZ to go down and hold Control so that you go exactly halfway down, because holding Control basically turns on snapping. And now I'm just going to press R to rotate it, and you can basically just rotate it just in the x-axis, something like that. However, if you want to rotate in increments, you have to hold Control, or if you want to rotate like one specific degree, for example, in this case, I want to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm just going to press R, and then after that, I'm just going to be pressing 90 on my keyboard. And if you press enter, you're going to see that it's going to apply, right? So now I'm going to just press G and hold Control so that it is moving properly. So right now, I think it is applied properly. Now, the reason why the shading is messed up is because basically this top part and this cube is actually in the same exact plane. So I'm going to have to move them slightly ahead. Just G, Y, and then just a tad bit ahead. That should be enough. So now I'm just going to be duplicating it on other sides as well. So what I can do is that I can select this, and then I can press Shift D on my keyboard and then Z and hold down Control so that we basically move down in increments. And so we're slightly above the cubes, that's why it's not visible. So I'm just going to be selecting this, and let's go to the side view and let's move it slightly down. GZ, just a tad bit down. Also, if at any point you're finding it difficult to follow along with this tutorial, that's perfectly fine, because I usually make my students do this project after a few hours of Blender experience. However, this time I want you guys to sort of just dive into a little more advanced project right away, so that you guys face some difficulty in the start. However, in the long run, it's going to be very good for you, because you guys would have basically early exposure to like what real Blender projects look like. Because I could have made like a fake, very cartoonish car, a very easy car, or something like that, but that wouldn't really be representative of what kind of work you're actually going to be doing when using Blender, right? So this time, and so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be rotating both of these. So I'm going to be selecting both of these, right? I'm going to press Shift D, and now instead of moving them, I'm going to press R on my keyboard, so that it's going to rotate them, right? And I'm going to be rotating in 90 degrees. So just write 90 on your keyboard, and now press G, hold down Control, and then move it in place, something like that. And that is perfect, right? Our colors have been added, right? Now, the only thing left to do is to add the materials, and we're going to be covering that in just a bit. However, right now, I think we are done with the modeling. So that's essentially how you create a Rubik's Cube in Blender. All right, so now let's talk about materials and textures inside of Blender 3D. Now, right now, you're going to see that everything is basically gray. How exactly do we add colors? We're just going to be talking about that right now. And how exactly do you make those colors and those materials look realistic? We're going to talk about that now, right? But before that, before adding the materials, we actually need to cover lighting, right? So we just need to set up a basic lighting setup, and then we can sort of start working with the materials, right? So to explain materials, I'm going to be deleting this cube right now. I'm just going to be hiding this. So you're going to see that we have all these things, right? So basically this is the cube, which is the actual Rubik's Cube. I'm going to Control Z. And these planes are basically the colors, right? And you're going to see that all of them are inside this collection, right? So basically the way collections work is that collections are sort of like folders, and you can have multiple objects inside one collection, and then you can just collapse that collection to sort of organize your scene better, right? So I'm just going to be calling this collection Rubik's Cube, right? So you can just name your collections properly, and then you can just sort of organize your scene, right? And yeah, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be clicking this tick button right here, which is going to disable this whole collection, and it's basically going to hide it, right? So that we can work without it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to add, I'm going to go to mesh, and then let's add a UV sphere. Now I'm just using this sphere to sort of show you guys the materials, how exactly they work, and sort of what sorts of results that you can expect from them, right? So I think right now the segments and everything are fine. So I'm just going to be right clicking this, and I'm going to auto shade smooth. I'm going to shade smooth. You can do auto shade smooth as well. However, shade smooth is fine as well. Right. One thing which we can do is that you're going to see that we have these jagged edges around the edges, right? So if I just right click this and shade flat, you're going to see that this part is being smoothed. That's perfectly fine. However, the edges, they're not being smoothed, right? So how exactly do you smooth them? You just have to add more segments. And one way to do that is by simply just when you add any object, you can just tweak these settings. However, once you add an object, you don't have an option, right? So the way you do that then is by adding a modifier. So I'm just going to be going to add modifier. And then this time we can just add the subdivision surface modifier. Now what this does is that this essentially just subdivides your geometry and adds more vertices, right? So you're going to see that if I disable this, you can disable modifiers by clicking this button right here. So you're going to see that previously it had less edges, and then it had more edges, right? We can just increase the levels viewport to increase the edges even more, something like that. And now we can right click and shade smooth. Now you're going to see that the edges are perfectly smooth as well. That's perfect, right? So now we can just go ahead and add materials. Now the subdivision surface modifier, by the way, is something which needs to be covered in more detail. So I'm going to be covering it in more detail in the future classes. However, right now I just don't want to make this tutorial too confusing, because this tutorial is mainly for mainly for texturing and adding materials. So we're going to focus on that right now, right? So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding a basic lighting setup. So I'm going to go to add, and then we simply go to add light, and then we basically have 4 options of lighting, right? So let me first show you the point light. You're going to see that the point light is not actually here. It's because the reason why we can't see it is because it's inside the sphere, right? So I'm going to be pressing G and Shift Z so that we move it in the X and the Y axes, and I'm going to see that this light is right here. Let's place it right there, and actually let's place it a little further, something like that. Right. So now what I'm going to do is that you're going to see that we're actually not seeing anything change, right? Because of this light. The reason for that is because we are inside this viewport shading mode. So if we go inside this material mode, this is basically the material mode, right? You're going to see that still nothing really is happening. But right now, the color of our object has changed. That is because this time it is actually showing us the materials that our objects have. And right now, this object, the sphere, just has a plain white material, right? Now, if you go to the rendered mode, you can see that now this light is actually taking effect, and it is actually affecting our scene. Now, if I just move this around, you're going to see that the lighting on our object is changing, just like that. Perfect. So I'm just going to be placing my light somewhere here. I think somewhere there should be a good option. And so what you can do is you can just simply select the light, and then you can go to the light settings. You can increase the power. If I set it to 20 watts, you can see that the power is going to be twice as much. You can also change the radius. Now, basically, I don't want to go too deep into the concepts of lighting, the fundamentals of lighting. However, in point lights, basically, the larger your radius is, the softer your shadows are going to be. Right now, the radius is very small. It's basically 0. So right now, you're going to see that the shadows are pretty sharp, right? The shadow line is pretty sharp. But if I start to increase it, you're going to see that the shadow line is starting to blur, right? And right now you're going to see that our rendered mode is not looking that good. That's because we are inside the Eevee render mode. So I'm just going to go to these render settings right here, and you're going to see that our render engine is Eevee. Now, if you have a very weak computer which does not, which is pretty slow and it's pretty old, then I would recommend you to actually use Eevee for now. However, if you have a good computer, then I would recommend you to switch over to Cycles, because Cycles is going to give you much better and much more realistic results, right? So let me just move this slightly away so that it's not intersecting with it. And let's actually go ahead and increase the power as well to something like 50 watts. Yeah, so right now you're going to see that right now our also, by the way, one more thing, if you have a GPU, just go back to the render settings, by the way. If you have a GPU, if you have a graphics card, then what you can do is you can go to your device and instead of CPU, set it to GPU compute. This is going to massively improve your render times, and it's going to sort of, yeah, just make your things faster because it's going to use the GPU, right? So right now you're going to see that the shadows are pretty smooth. If I just go ahead and reduce the radius, you're going to see that the shadow line is going to become sharper, right? And you're going to see that it's pretty sharp, right? So that's just something which you need to keep in mind. If you want to make a very moody scene in which the scene is very dramatic and there are a lot of shadows and stuff like that, then I would recommend you to use a lower radius. However, if you're trying to make a scene which is very soft, which is very diffused, which is very friendly, then I would recommend you to actually use a very larger radius, right? Especially in cartoon scenes. In cartoon scenes, we generally like to use larger lights. Okay, so that's basically one type of lights. Then the second type is sunlight. So I'm just going to be deleting this light right here. Select it and delete it. Now you're going to see the sunlight is essentially just a sun, right? Moving it doesn't really make a difference, right? You can place it wherever you want because the sun doesn't really need to move in this scene. However, you can rotate it. So if you rotate it, you're going to see that it's going to rotate just like the normal sun would, right? And then you can also increase the angle. This angle is essentially the same thing as the radius, right? It's essentially going to control how soft your shadows are. So, but generally you want to keep this low because sun shadows are pretty, what do you call it? Pretty sharp. Then you can control the strength as well. You can change the color. I'm going to be setting the strength back to 1. And so you can change the color as well. However, do not do this. Do not change the color because it is going to look very bad. It's going to look very unrealistic. Generally, I just like to set it to white or maybe like a very slight yellow, if anything, right? So that's the sunlight. There's really not much to it. You just add a sunlight and it's job done. Anyway, so let's go back to the light menu, and this time we have a spotlight. Now, a spotlight is exactly what it suggests. It's basically a spotlight, right? And you can essentially control everything of the spotlight. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be increasing the intensity of this slightly, the power of this. Intensity, power are the same thing. I might use those words interchangeably, so just don't be confused. Now the radius is basically the radius of the light, right? If the radius is higher, the shadows are going to be softer. And you can also use this yellow dot right here to control where your light goes, right? So you can just place it on top of objects, or you can sort of move it away if you want. And then you also have the spot size. If you increase this, you're going to see that our spotlight is going to change shape, something like that. And then you also have this blend option, which essentially just blends in your light, if that makes sense, right? So something like that. And yeah, so that's basically the spotlight. You just need to use it in different situations where you have a spotlight and you want to sort of add a light on top of it, right? So that's where you would use it. However, generally, I just don't like to use spotlight that often. I just don't use spotlight that often. I generally use the area light. And that brings me to the last light, which is going to be the area light. Now, this is by far my favorite light because the results that it gives you, the results that it gives you are honestly the best. And so basically with this area light, what you can do is it's basically like an area which emits light, if that makes sense. So you can just rotate it in the y-axis 90 degrees. I'm just going to press 90 on my keyboard and then I'm going to press enter, right? So something like that. And you can also control the size of this. Again, the larger the size, the softer the shadows. Just keep that in mind. You can see that if I reduce the size, you're going to see that the shadows are sharper. However, if I just increase the size, you're going to see that the shadows are going to become softer and softer. So generally you want to have lights which are very large to have soft shadows and something like that. So I'm just going to be setting the power to 50, or maybe something like 30 should be enough because 50 was sort of making it overexposed. Also, another quick tip for you guys. If you want to make sure that your image is not overexposed, this image is not clipping, then what you want to do is you want to go back to the render settings, go down to color management, and in the view transform, just click false color. Now you're going to see that everything which is blue is underexposed, everything which is gray is basically correctly exposed, and everything which is sort of green is slightly overexposed, and everything which is yellow is slightly more overexposed. However, if something becomes white or red, then that means it's very, very overexposed. So right now I think we're looking good, but I'm gonna change the power. You're gonna see that if I change the power, less of the object is going to become overexposed and more of it is going to become underexposed. However, if I just go ahead and increase this, you're going to see that it becomes red, and eventually it will become, actually never mind, yeah, it does become white eventually. However, you want to avoid the color red and the color white. So something like, I think 30 should be a good spot, or maybe even 20. I think 20 is fine. Perfect. Let's go back to our normal mode. So I'm going to go to my render settings, go down to color management, and view transform, just set that to filmic, right? That is perfectly fine. So what we can do is we can add multiple lights to sort of make your scene look better. And the lighting setup, which I generally like to use, is called the 3-point lighting setup. So I'm just going to go to the internet and I'm going to be showing you an example of that. 3-point lighting. If I just search that on the internet and if I go to images, you're going to see that, yeah, I think this is a good example. So basically you have 3 lights, right? This is the camera, by the way. You have 3 lights. The first one is the key light, right? This is the light which sort of lights up your whole subject, right? Your main subject. And this is the fill light. This fill light sort of fills in the shadows of your subject, right? If this doesn't make sense, by the way, then I will explain this a lot in this class. So just don't worry and just be with me. Okay. And then you have the backlight. This is also called the, what do you call it? The rim light. This basically just highlights a few aspects of your subject, right? Now, I know this doesn't make any sense, so let me just go ahead and show you an example. So basically, in this scene, you're going to see that this image only has the key light, right? It has the light which lights up the subject. However, these shadows are pretty dark, right? These shadows are pretty dark. So this basically has another light, which is called the rim light. This basically adds in some detail from the back. It just, it is basically a light which is from the back, right? So it just adds in some detail. And then we have a fill light. Fill light basically just fills in the shadows which are left by the key light, right? In this scene, you're going to see that there is no fill light. There are a lot of shadows. However, in this, the shadows are covered up, right? So that's how you use this lighting. Now we're going to be doing a 3-point lighting setup on this sphere. So let's go ahead and do that. So, but first we actually need to set up our camera. We need to have a place where our camera is going to be set up, and we need to sort of, light it accordingly, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going ahead and adding a camera. Let's go back to our viewport mode just because. And so I'm just going to go to add. Let's add a camera. Right, and now you're going to see that the camera is in this middle. So I'm just going to press G and Shift Z and move it right here. Let me just move it in the Y-axis, something like that. So now you're going to see that our camera is in our scene. However, it is tilted, right? And how exactly do we go inside the camera? So the way we go inside the camera is by clicking this button right here. This is the toggle camera view button. The shortcut of this is number pad 0. Also, if you don't have a number pad, what you can do is you can just go to Edit, Preferences, and then you can go to Input and emulate number pad. Now, whichever key you press on your actual number keys on top of your keyboard, the number line, right? That those keys are actually going to work as the number pad. So you can just turn that on if you're on a laptop or if you don't have a larger keyboard like I do. So you can just press this button. I just generally like to press this button. Now you're going to see that if I try to move my camera, you're going to see that I actually get out of my camera, and we can't really move our camera like that. And if we sort of want to move our camera, we're going to have to use these tools, right? Something like 45 degrees like that. Not 45. I'm just going to go to the top view. Let me rotate it like that. And then let's rotate it like that. But obviously this way is very inefficient and it's very inaccurate, right? You can't really adjust your camera on the fly. It's really slow, by the way. For example, if I'm going to move it a little down, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get out of the camera. I'm going to have to select it. I'm just going to have to eyeball it a little bit. Just a second. Something like that. And then I'm going to have to go again. And then I'm going to have to make more changes. And it's going to be very slow, right? So the way you control your camera while being inside your camera is by simply going to the view option, this view tab right here. If you don't have this menu, by the way, you can just, I'm just going to close it. You can just press this button right here, this thing, and it's going to open this menu. So I'm just going to go to view, lock, and lock camera to view. Just click this button right here. Now, if I just go inside my camera and if I move my viewport, you're going to see that it's actually going to move our camera, something like that. So let's place our camera somewhere there. Also, our aspect ratio of the camera is 16:9 right now, but I actually want to change that. I actually want to make that a square. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go right here in the output properties, and then I can just set the resolution X. Let's just let the resolution X be 1920, but I'm going to set the resolution Y to that same number as well, because we obviously want in a square image, both the dimensions are the same, right? I hope you know that much. Anyway, so I'm just going to be placing my camera somewhere there. I think that should be a center point. And now I'm going to unlock camera to view and let's get out of our camera. So now our camera has been perfectly placed, right? Now we can go ahead and complete the lighting, right? So what I'm going to do, what I usually like to do is that I like to sort of break my viewport into two parts. I like to have two viewports, and in one of them, I like to see the actual final result from the camera, from the view of the camera in rendered mode. And the other viewport, I actually like to use that to sort of place the lights and control everything else, right? So I'm just going to do that, exactly that. The way you create two viewports in Blender CD is by simply going to this area right here, anywhere here, and it's your cursor is gonna become these two-faced arrow. So just right click there and click vertical split. Now you're gonna see that it's gonna bring up a line. Wherever you click, it's gonna create a new viewport right there, right? So that's exactly how you do this. And in this viewport, I'm just gonna be clicking the camera button right here. Let's go in and let's close this out. And let's go in the rendered mode so that we can obviously see what's happening. And then what I'm going to do is that you can actually go ahead and turn off all these guides by clicking this button right here and this button right here. So if you close both of them, you're going to see that we're really not going to see any of those grids or any of those extra guides which were sort of distracting us. You can also turn these on if you want by clicking these buttons again, right? So I think that should be good. Let me just make this a little smaller. I think something like that should be good because we only need to look at the sphere, right? Right, so now let's start with the actual lighting. So firstly, I'm going to use this as my key light, right? So I'm just going to be rotating this, or Z, something like that. Let's press G, Shift Z to move it in this area, something like that. And I'm going to be making this smaller slightly because your key light is generally smaller than your fill light. So I think that should be a good key light because I think the effect that it's creating is pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating this light. Let's actually go to the top view because I think it's much better looking at the top view. So I'm going to be pressing Shift and D on my keyboard to duplicate this, and then I'm going to be placing this light somewhere there, and I'm going to be rotating it. I just pressed R to rotate it, something like that. And what you would generally notice is that your fill light, the intensity of your fill light is going to be a lot less than your key light, and it is generally larger as well. So I'm just going to be scaling it up by pressing S, something like that, and then I'm going to be reducing. It's my bad. And I'm going to go to the light settings, and I'm going to be reducing the power as well to something like 5 watts, because we obviously do want that shadow, right? Shadow is good. Shadow is your friend. It really creates that feeling of depth, right? But you don't want to have too many shadows, right? If that makes sense. So I'm just going to be duplicating this key light once again, and now we're going to be making the rim light, or as it's called, the backlight. So I'm going to press Shift D. Let's bring it back somewhere there. Let's rotate it, something like that. Let's bring it closer. I think I'm going to place it somewhere there like that. And I'm going to be increasing the intensity to 50. Yeah, so you're going to see it's really highlighting that area on the back. I think it looks really nice, right? So that's how you create a basic 3-point lighting setup. Obviously, you can modify this however you want. In most of my scenes, I like to use, in most of my product visualization scenes, I like to use multiple rim lights. There are scenes where I've used more than like 4 or 5 rim lights. It just really comes down to your personal preference, sort of, and it really comes down to what sort of look you're going for. We can also scale this up in the Z-axis only, because to sort of make it longer, right? What we can do is we can just press S and Z, scale it up like that. Something like that should be good. So I think it's covering more of the area on the back. Right, so I think our lighting part is done. One other thing which I would like to mention here is that right now you're going to see that the background or our scene or the whole world, if I just move around, you're going to see that the whole world is a shade of gray, right? And what if you don't want that? Also, by the way, if you have your guides turned off and you want to go back to your camera, you're going to have to turn them on again. Just click this button right here to turn on these guides and click the camera button and then turn it off. Or you can use the number pad 0 shortcut. Right, so what if you want to make the background black? We can do that very simply. You just go to the world properties right here. And then you can just go to this color thing right here. Just click right here. And instead of gray, I'm just going to make this black. I think that looks a lot better, doesn't it? Right, so that's perfect. And now let's go ahead and start working on the materials. I'm going to be showing you how to create different sorts of materials and what are the basic things which you need to consider while making a material. So for that, I'm just going to be going to the shading tab. Just click the shading button right here, and it's going to open everything in this, in this, what do you call it? This new layout, right? So I'm just going to be clicking the camera icon once again, and let's go to our rendered mode like that. Let's zoom in slightly, and let's turn off the guide so that we can see this more easily. So I'm just going to be selecting the sphere, and right now if I just go to the material tab, you're going to see that this is basically the materials property tab, and this is where the materials are created and edited. So I'm just going to click this right here. You're going to see right now we don't really have any sorts of materials, right? So what we can do is we can just go ahead and create a new material, and you're going to see that something is going to change in your scene. You can have a lot of these settings. Don't worry about any of these. These might look a little intimidating, a little confusing, but trust me, all of these are very, very simple and very intuitive to use. Right. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be hiding this node setup right here because we don't really need this right now. And we can do pretty much everything with this, these options right here. However, we are going to be using the nodes later on. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and firstly, we can change, so I'm going to be explaining all these settings one by one. So firstly, let's go to the base color. And the base color is essentially exactly what it says. It's basically the color. You can just change the color to whatever you want. So what if we make it something like that, orange? I think that looks really nice. Right, so I think you can just change the color like that, and you can even make it brighter, something like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the intensity of my area lights, just make it a little higher. Yeah, so my key light was 20 watts. I'm just going to make it 40 watts. Actually, 30 watts might be good. And the fill light as well, I'm just going to make it 10 watts. Yeah, perfect. Let's go back to our sphere, and now we can continue with the materials. So basically, I'm just going to be skipping these subsurface settings because we're going to come back to them later on. These are a little more advanced. These are usually used when you're making skin and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be covering these right now. So I'm just going to go down to the metallic settings. So metallic is essentially exactly what it says. If you increase it to 1, you're going to see that your object is going to look as if it was made from metal, right? It looks pretty good. And generally, like either 0 is used or 1 is used. There's no in between value because an object is either a metal or not a metal, right? So generally either 0 or 1 is used. Specular is basically the amount of reflection that your object does. If I just reduce it to 0, you're going to see that our object is going to reflect nothing. But if I increase it to 1, you're going to see that our object is going to reflect a lot more than it was previously. I'm going to press Ctrl Z twice because generally we just like to leave it at 0.5. And the specular tint, we don't need to worry about this. It basically just modifies the reflection slightly, but we don't really need to worry about this at all. Roughness is something which we are going to change in pretty much everything. If I reduce the roughness, you're going to see, if I reduce it to 0, you're going to see that it's going to become something like a gloss, right? And it's going to look pretty good. However, it is not looking that good because generally we don't like to set the roughness to 0 that often. So we just, if we want something to be reflective, we just set it to something like 0.2. I think that looks a lot better, right? You can make things shiny or you can make things super rough if that's what you want. And so that's an option we have. I'm just going to leave it somewhere there. Then you go down to anisotropic. I'm just going to skip these. Most of these settings we're not really going to use. So I'm just going to be skipping the anisotropic settings, sheen settings, and clear coat settings for now. The IOR is basically the index of refraction, right? So if I just go to the internet and I search for IOR, it's basically an index of refraction values, right? So basically different objects have sort of different IORs, right? So if I want to sort of create glass, right, I'm going to be searching for IOR of glass, and then I'm going to be setting that value. I'm just going to go to the internet, go to all, and then it's around 1.5, right? So I'm just going to be setting the IOR of, if I want to make it glass, to 1.5. So I'm just going to be setting this to 1.5, something like that. And we don't really need to go into too much detail about how this works or what exactly is it, but you just need to sort of Google, basically, if you're trying to make metal, if you're trying to make glass, whatever you're trying to make, if you're trying to make plastic or whatever, you just have to search the IOR of that specific object, and this just set the value of that object, right? After that, we have transmission. Transmission is basically, it is essentially just transparent, just making the object transparent. So if I increase it, you're going to see that our object is going to become translucent. The reason why it's not become completely transparent is because our roughness is actually more than 0. Generally in transparent objects, you want to set your roughness to be 0. And now you're going to see that this object is perfectly reflective and perfectly transparent. So that's that. So I'm just going to be increasing this to somewhere there, and I'm just going to be reducing the transmission. This is generally used to make glass, and when you're using transmission, you generally want to control the IOR as well. You can just move around and see what looks best as well. And again, the transmission roughness is basically how rough your glass is. So you can just do that. Now let's move on to emission. So emission is basically your object emitting color. If you want to, let's say, make a glowing object, right? Then you could just go to emission, bring this value up, something like that, and now you're going to see that it's going to emit light. And if I set this color to whatever I want, something like that, then it's going to emit that color. And you can also control the emission strength. If I increase it too much, you're going to see that it's just going to become white. And yeah, you can just basically control the strength however you want. So those are the basic material settings. You can also control the alpha. This is basically the opacity of the material. So you can just make it translucent or transparent if you want. And yeah, those are the basic settings which you're going to be working with most of the time. We are going to come on these other settings. However, we're not going to cover them right now, right? So those are the basics of materials in Blender 3D. Now let's move on to learning the basics of textures. So basically for the textures, we're going to have to use the shading tab down here. And so basically what textures are is that you can essentially, instead of like plugging in a value, instead of having a value in any of these things, you can actually have an image, right? An image texture. So let's first start with adding a base color texture to this, right? So what if you want to, actually first I'm just going to go ahead and turn the emission back to black so that it doesn't have any emission. And I'm going to set the strength to 0 as well. Be sure to save everything if you are following along, right? So what if I want to make this like a planet, right? What if I want to make this like Earth? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the internet and I'm going to be searching for Earth texture. Let's just search for the Earth texture and let's go to images and let's go ahead and just get anything. Actually, there's a website, which I think it's this one, solar textures. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah, this one. So in this, you can basically get textures for all sorts of planets, right? So we're going to be using the Earth textures. So I'm just going to be downloading the ultra resolution. I would recommend you to download the 8K version as well, because this 8K is not for one side, right? It's for all sides combined, right? It's basically going to wrap around your whole object. And so I'm just going to be right clicking this, save image as, let's just save it. And then you can also get the night map if you want. You can get the Earth clouds if you want. I am going to download this one as well. So let's go ahead and download that. And we have the normal map as well. Let's download this one. So basically there are a few types of, and let's get the specular map as well, by the way. So basically there are a few types of textures, right? So first you have the albedo textures. These are called the color textures. Sometimes they're called the albedo textures. So these are basically the color which your object is going to have, right? Then you have the normal map. Normal map is essentially what tells how bumpy your object is going to be, right? How imperfect your object is going to be. So that's that. And then you have the specular map, which is also called the roughness map. So basically in this, what you have to do is you can simply just plug this map in, and some parts of the object are going to be reflective, some parts of the object are going to be matte, right? So I think we have the day map, we have the normal map, the specular map. The only thing left is to download the cloud map, and I think everything else is done, right? So we have the 4 maps already. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my download folder. I'm going to show all, and then I can just show in folder, so that I can just download them. So what I can do is that I can simply just drag these directly inside of Blender, right? So make sure that your material is open. So let's go ahead and download let's go ahead and bring in the day map first. So I'm just going to be dragging this inside Blender, right, like that. And let's place it right there. So basically now you have that texture, that image texture inside of Blender. Now you have this color output, right? You have to just plug this into the base color input of your texture. It's as simple as that. This might seem a little difficult. However, you will get used to this very fast. And when you do, it's going to be very, very easy for you. Basically, you just take a color, you just take an image texture, and you just plug the color value into the base color of your material. Right now, if I just go around this object, you're going to see that it has the texture of our planet. So that's perfect. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to my camera, and now we can just go ahead and add other textures as well. However, before that, I'm just going to be rotating the cube, the sphere, RZ, something like that. I think, yeah, let's have this area. Let's show Africa. I think that's fine. Okay, so now what we can do is that we can go back to the internet, back to Google Chrome, and this time I'm going to be downloading the normal map, and so I'm just going to be dragging this into my scene, just something like that. And this is basically a TIFF file format, and this one is JPEG, so just don't worry about that. TIFF file formats work perfectly fine as well. And so in normal maps, you can't really directly plug them into the normal input. If you do, it's going to look all messed up. So what you have to do is you have to basically, I'm just going to be unplugging this. You have to press Shift A to add a new node, and then you have to search for a normal map node. Just search for the normal map node. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this works and how to sort of add new nodes, how to work with nodes, because I think that is quite advanced. I am just going to be showing you the very, very basics so that you can get started with using Blender. And so now you're going to see that it is looking a lot better, isn't it? So basically our normal map is working. One thing which I am going to do is that I'm going to be changing the color space from sRGB to non-color. You're going to see that that made a huge difference. So now if I just go close to my object, you're going to see that it looks as if it is actually bumpy, right? It looks as if the mountains are actually bumpy, if that makes sense. If I just unplug it, you're going to see that it all looks flat. But if I press Ctrl Z and add the normal map, you're going to see that it's going to look bumpy. There's a massive difference in that, isn't it? So that's why you use normal maps. They're basically for adding bumps. But now I think this looks very fake. So let's go ahead and add the specular map. So I'm just going to be adding this specular map in Blender. It didn't add it for some reason, so I'm just going to be trying again. No worries. And so let me just place this right here. So you generally want to organize your nodes, organize these nodes in such a way that it doesn't look very disorganized, and because disorganized nodes are very hard to sort of work on when you come back to them. So again, just change the color space to non-color. This is something you need to do with all the image textures except for the ones which are directly plugged into the base color tab, base color option. So I'm just going to be plugging the color into roughness, something like that. Actually, I think it wasn't roughness. Maybe we need to do it in specular. Yeah, I think specular works better, because thing is that basically what's happening is that if I plug it into the roughness, you're going to see that the parts which were supposed to be matte are actually shiny, and the parts which were supposed to be shiny are actually matte. So that's not something which we want. So I'm just going to be unplugging it like that and plug it into the specular. Perfect. All right, so I think now basically the water parts are basically shiny, and however the land parts are not shiny. So that's exactly what you want. And so let me go back to my camera. And now let's add the cloud texture. Now the cloud texture is not something we're going to be adding on this exact sphere. So what we're going to be doing is that we're actually going to be duplicating this sphere, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Shift D on my keyboard to actually create a new sphere. I'm going to press S to scale it up, and then that's too much. And I'm just going to be scaling it up a tad bit compared to the actual. I think something like that should be good. Let's go back to our viewport mode. Let's press Alt Z so that we can see the X-ray mode. Let's go back to our layout mode so that we can look at it better. Let's go back to the viewport mode like that, and let's see how big of a difference there is. So there's a tiny bit of a difference between those two spheres. So generally when you're making planets, you need to have another layer of sphere, which is going to be for the clouds. So I'm just going to be, now let's go back to our camera, and now with this new sphere, we're actually going to be unplugging all these textures, and we're going to be adding a brand new cloud texture to this. So I'm just going to be going to right there. It didn't add it for some reason. My bad. Let's go ahead and add it now. Right. Let's first plug this into the base color. However, right now you're going to see that every basically there are a lot of parts which are black, right? And we want those black parts to be essentially transparent, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be taking this alpha output. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be actually going to be duplicating this. So I'm going to press Shift D and let's move it down. And this time I'm going to set this to non-color. And then I'm going to be plugging this into the alpha channel. So if I do that, you're going to see that it is going to become transparent. However, for some reason it is not looking good. Okay, that's my bad. So what I did was I actually changed the original material as well. So I'm going to be undoing everything, all this, so that we can start from the beginning once again. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be selecting the new sphere, and we're actually going to be clicking this icon right here, this number 2 thing right here. So basically what this does is that this displays the numbers of objects which have this exact material, right? So if I click this, Now it's going to create this into a new material, because previously what was happening was that if we select this sphere and if we change the material of this sphere, let's say we delete this, it's going to affect the other sphere as well. But right now it's not going to do that. So if I just go ahead and delete these, you're going to see if I go back to my original sphere, it's going to retain that exact same material, right? So now I'm just going to bring in the clouds like that. Now this might be a little confusing for you guys, but don't worry if it is. You will get used to this really fast. I know when I was learning Blender in the beginning, I was super confused by all this stuff. So let's just plug this into the alpha. Now you're going to see that it's essentially going to be exactly the way we expect it to be. The clouds are on top of the Earth. And so right now the problem is that I think this scale is a little too small. So I'm just going to be increasing the scale a little bit. Something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And then you can just select the clouds and then you can rotate them however way you want, and just place them in such a way that they look realistic and they look good. I think that looks pretty good. However, one thing which I'm going to do, I think our material part is done. Now let's go back to our layout mode and let's actually modify the lighting a little bit, because in space what's happening is that there's no light which is this close to the object, right? And there's no fill light as well. So we're going to be taking away the fill light. Let's delete it, select and delete it. Then we're going to be selecting this key light and moving it far, far away, something like that. And actually maybe placing it something like that as well. And then I'm going to be increasing the strength of this light quite a lot. Something like 3000. Yeah, so I think that is going to be accurate. Let's select the sphere and let's move it slightly. I think something like that is a better representation. Then we have this rim light, which we can actually repurpose as like a fill light or something like that if we want. I'm going to be scaling this up quite a lot. Yeah, and that's basically our planet, right? So that's how you create planets in Blender 3D. And while learning how to create a planet, we also learned how to sort of use the basics of textures and stuff like that, right? So I think your basics of textures are pretty much complete. You just need to use the shading tab, and you just need to plug in different sort of texture maps inside of this. You can even get a roughness map if you want. You can get a normal maps. You can also get displacement maps if you want, but I'm not going to cover them right now because they are a little more advanced. Apart from that, you can also get metallic maps. You can turn this into metallic if you want, but I think that's gonna look very bad. So you can have this metallic sort of earth if you want. However, I'm not going to do that. Right, so I think we are pretty much done. I think one thing which I want to do is I want to make the water a little darker, because right now it's way too bright. So I think something like that. Let's do something like that. Yeah, I think that's better. So what I want to do is I want to make the water a little, a little darker. So what we can do is that we can essentially just get this node right here. And so basically we can just press Shift A to create new nodes. So I'm going to be searching for, I don't know, let's go for a brightness contrast node. So if we do that, and if you just bring it in the middle, right here in the middle of this line, and repress it, you're going to see that it's going to automatically insert itself into the middle. Right, so I'm just going to be reducing the brightness, not that much, something like that, or maybe minus 0.5. I think that's looking a lot better. It's looking a lot more realistic. Also, one thing which you might be noticing is the fact that this image has a lot less contrast. If you want to have more contrast in this image, what you can do is you can simply go to the render properties, go down to color management, and in this look, instead of none, just set it to high contrast. If you do that, you're going to see that now it's going to look very contrasty, right? And while we've made this beautiful looking render, what we can do is we can just go ahead and render this out. So the way you render things out in Blender 3D is by simply first going to the render properties. And in here, you're going to see in the sampling tab, you're going to go down to render, right? And here, what you're going to do is that you are going to set the max samples to something like 500. Actually, 1000 should be fine. If you have a slow PC, then I would recommend you to set it to 500 or even less. But if you have a good PC, I think 1000 should be more than enough. So once you've done that, basically the more samples you have, the less noisier your image is going to be. However, the more time it's going to take to render as well. So I'm just going to go to render, Let's render image. And now it's just gonna start to render the image. And you're gonna see that the samples are being done. So 20 out of 1000. And so I will see when this is done, and then I'll show you how to save your image. Right, so once your image has completed rendering, you can just go ahead and go to image and then save as, and then just save it wherever you want. So I'm just going to call this Earth Blender and just save as image. And now you're going to see that if we go and open the image, you're going to see that we have this image, right? So if you followed this tutorial this far, if you were able to follow it this far, then I'm very proud of you. If you weren't, then that's perfectly fine. I myself, when I was starting to learn Blender 3D, it was really difficult for me to follow these sorts of tutorials because this was a relatively intermediate tutorial, I would say. So just be sure to keep practicing. Be sure to not get demotivated if you were not able to follow this. And yeah, anyways, I'll see you in the next project. All right, so now since we're done with this project, let's move on to let's move back to that Rubik's Cube, and let's actually texture it, and let's add materials on it, and then we will light it and we'll render it out, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting everything basically, and I'm just going to be hiding them, and this is basically to hide them in the viewport. But if I actually go ahead and render this, you're going to see that if I render image, it is still going to be visible, right? Although it's hidden. And the reason for that is because we don't have this turned on. This is basically the render view. So if I turn this off as well, you're going to see now if I render this, it's going to render as completely black. So basically, if you are hiding something in your viewport, make sure to hide it in the render as well. Otherwise, it's going to, it's going to show up in the render. And oftentimes it has caused me a lot of confusion and a lot of troubleshooting just because I just forgot about it. Anyway, so I'm just going to be turning on the Rubik's Cube back again. And I'm going to press Alt-Z on my keyboard. I think my shortcuts is turned off, so I'm just going to turn that on. Let me close this out so you can see which buttons I'm pressing right here. Anyway, so now what we're going to be doing is that we are actually, first let me just go ahead and turn the camera back on so that we can place the camera properly. And let's turn on our viewport guides in this. And let's click this button right here so that we can move our camera again. View, lock camera to view. And I'm going to press Alt middle mouse button to lock it to this. I think we should place our camera somewhere there. I think that should be a good starting point for our camera. We can move it later on. And I'm just going to unlock it real quick. Perfect. So now what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be rendering this. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go inside my rendered viewport mode. Right now it's not really showing anything because we don't have any lights. Now we basically have two options. Either we could just go ahead and add lights like these, like the ones which we added previously, or we can use another lighting technique, which is called adding HDRIs. Now what HDRIs are, if I just go to the internet and if I search it, HDRI, not HDRI Haven, this is basically the website which we used to download. HDRIs, however, basically what HDRIs are is that they're essentially 3D images of real world places which you can use to sort of cast lights on your scene, right? So we're just going to go to the internet, and then we're going to go and search for HDRI Haven. Then just go to this website, which is called polyhaven.com. And it was previously called HDRI Haven, but now it's Polyhaven. So once you're in this website, you can just go ahead and select any HDRI that you want. Now I'm going to use an indoor HDRI. You typically want to use something which is appropriate to your scene. If you're shooting an outdoor scene, then use an outdoor HDRI. If you want a studio look, then you can go ahead and choose a studio HDRI. But this time I'm going to be using an indoor sort of HDRI. So I'm just going to look for something good. I think something like that should be good. This Brown Photo Studio. I think that is a pretty neutral look. So I'm just going to be going ahead and downloading this. So minimum, I would recommend you to download 4K quality. However, if you can go 8K or 16K, that is definitely recommended. And HDR format works perfectly fine. So just go ahead and download this. And it is going to take a minute to download. So I'll see when it's done. All right, so while this is downloading, let's go ahead and create a table for our Rubik's Cube, because obviously we're going to need a table, right? So what I'm going to do is that let's turn off rendered view, by the way, just so that we can save performance and we can get a better frame rate. Right, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be creating a plane, add mesh and plane, because our plane is just going to be a table, and I'm just going to be placing it something like that, somewhere there. Just make sure that it is not intersecting the table. Even if it is a little above, that doesn't really make that much of a difference. Just move it something like that. I think that should be good. Let's increase the size. And now if you want to extend the table down, I'm just going to be showing you how to model a very basic table. You can just press tab to go into edit mode, right? Go to face select mode, go to select the bottom face, right? And so if I just press E and extrude it down, something like that. So that's going to be our table bottom part. And then I'm just going to press I to inset it, something like that. Inset it, something like that. And let's go and extrude it out even more. And let's actually scale it down, something like that. And then we can extrude it down even more. And then what we can do is that we can press E to extrude it, and then extrude it something like that. I think that should be our base. And so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting all these bases. So this base, this side, and this side. Also, if you want to select a whole loop, like if you want to select like faces all around, what you can do is you can simply double click it. And it's right now what the problem which we did was that we actually selected this loop, right? This loop which was going around there. So if I click around this edge, you're going to see that it's going to select that loop. So that's perfectly fine. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press E and then S to extrude and then scale up. However, I'm going to also press Shift Z so that we only extrude and scale it up in the X and Y axes. So something like that should be a good base for us. Now what I'm going to do is that I actually want to sort of smooth it out. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the subdivision surface modifier, and I actually want to introduce that as well using this tutorial. So we can just go to the modifiers tab, add modifier, and let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Right now you're going to see that it's way too smooth, which I actually kind of like, but I'm going to show you how to make it a little more sort of sharp around the edges if you want. So we can increase the levels viewport to something like 3 and render to 3 as well. You generally want to keep the levels viewport lower if your computer is slower, so that you can basically save performance while you're editing. And then once you're done with it, you can just render the high resolution version of it. And I'm going to right click, shade smooth, and I'm going to turn on auto smooth as well. And I think if you just press shade auto smooth, I think it should do all this for you. I think let's turn it on and let's see what it does. Yeah, it just turns it on. So I would recommend you to just do shade auto smooth because that's more efficient. Now let's say you want to sort of make this a little more sharp, right, around the edges. The way you can do that is by adding loop cuts, right? So what loop cuts do is basically, if I want to make it a square again, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Ctrl R and I'm going to be adding a loop cut right here. So now if I add a loop cut and if I bring it closer to the edges, you're going to see that the shape of our table is going to change and it's going to become more sharp around the edges. So that's how you essentially modify the subdivision surface modifier, by adding loop cuts around the edges. The closer you take them to the edges, the sharper it's going to become. So I think something like that is good. We can maybe add a loop cut down there as well. Ctrl R, bring it up, something like that, and that should look good. I think the bottom part is fine. Yeah, so I think we're looking pretty good with the table. So one thing which I am going to do is that I'm going to be adding a loop cut along this edge as well, because I want the top of the table to be sharp. And actually, let's make the bottom sharp as well, something like that. So let's add a loop cut and bring it to the bottom. Right, so I think now our table is looking pretty decent. It is obviously not that great, if I'm being honest. Like, it's not something which I would usually use in any of my scenes. However, for beginners, I think it's really nice. You can add other loop cuts around these edges as well if you want to make it square. So there's that. Perfect. Another way to do this would be to use the bevel modifier, because that's going to automatically bevel around the edges and it's going to make your subdivision surface modifier less smooth without having to sort of add all these loop cuts. Let's see if our HDRI is downloaded. It is. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using this HDRI. I'm just going to be dragging this onto my desktop just so that I can sort of, just so that it's easier for me to apply it. Otherwise, you would obviously want to create a whole HDRI library, and I do have an HDRI library, but right now, just for simplicity's sake, I wanted to drag it to the desktop. So what I'm going to do to add the HDRI is, let me first go ahead and, actually, I don't think we need two viewports for this. Let's just close this one viewport. So the way we do that is by right clicking right here, click join areas, and then whichever one you want to dissolve, you can just click that one. So if I want to dissolve that, it's just going to go away. And so let's go into the rendered viewport mode. Right now there are no lights. Be sure to save your project. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to this world properties, and instead of the color, we actually could change the color. If you remember, we did that previously. Instead of doing that, we're going to press this yellow dot right here, and then we're going to go inside this environment texture. If we do that, you're going to see that everything is going to become purple, and we're going to have these options. So if I just click open, now we can just go ahead and browse over to where we saved that HDRI. And I'm not exactly sure what it was called. Brown Photo Studio. Okay. Brown Photo Studio. Open image. And now you're going to see magically we have the whole HDR applied as the background, which is absolutely perfect. Right? I think our scene looks pretty good. I think our scene's lighting is especially good. So, but right now we don't really have any textures or anything like that. So we're going to have to go ahead and add those. So I'm just going to go inside my camera, and right now you're going to see that even though our camera is right here, everything outside of our camera is also rendering. If you don't want to do that, and if you want to render everything which is inside your camera, by the way, the reason why you would want to do this is because so that you can save some performance and you can actually look at how your camera is going to look, right? So what you can do is you can press Ctrl B on your keyboard, and then you can just highlight this area of your camera, and then it's going to automatically snap to the camera only. Right? And so I'm just going to press Ctrl S. And so now we can just go ahead and start to add the textures, right? Our lighting is essentially just done. It was just as simple as that. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting the cube first, and let's go ahead and add a material to this. Let's go to the material tab, add a new material. The base color, I'm going to be setting it to black. I think something like that should be good. Don't go perfectly black or perfectly white in anything, because in real life, nothing is really perfectly black or perfectly white. Everything is a shade of gray. So I'm going to be reducing the roughness to make it a little shinier. Let's zoom in to see it better. You can also turn on denoising, by the way. So just go to the render settings and turn on denoise. If you have an NVIDIA RTX graphic card, turn on optics. Otherwise, just set it to automatic and it's going to just denoise your image for you, and it's going to look a lot better. So right now I think we probably should see this, make sure that it is shaded smooth. Let's just do that. And so I'm going to be reducing the roughness a little more. Something like that. I think that is better. Maybe a little more. Yeah, I think something like that should be good. And now if you want an all white Rubik's Cube, you have that ready. But if you don't, you can go ahead and add new materials on this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be making a solved Rubik's Cube. So the way we do that is by simply adding a new material. And I'm just going to be changing the base color to something like green first. Because when I was learning the Rubik's Cube, I actually solved the green side first, always. And the reason for that was because the YouTube video that I watched to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube was, in that video, the guy solved the green side first. So I just have a habit. I think, I'm not entirely sure which colors are in the Rubik's Cube and on which sides. So I'm just going to search for Rubik's Cube. Right, so yeah, this picture is going to be very helpful for us. So above green is yellow. So I'm just going to make a yellow color. Something like that should be good. You can just choose whichever shade of yellow you want. And then on the left side, you have orange. Select it, orange, something like that. And that is looking good. Yeah, perfect. Now you can go ahead and apply materials to other sides as well. So I think this side, yeah, this side would be blue, and the other side I think should be white. Make it blue, and then I think this. Okay, so the one at the bottom should be white, and the one next to blue should be red. So I'm just going to make this red. Right, I think it looks pretty good. And then the bottom is already white. We don't really need to do anything to that. Right now, you're going to see that our Rubik's Cube is looking good. However, our table is not. Table is definitely not looking that good. So what I'm going to do to fix that is that I'm going to be applying a texture to this. Now, the texture which we're going to be applying is just going to be a simple texture from which we're going to take from the internet. So I'm just going to go to the internet and I'm going to search for wood texture seamless. And the reason why we're writing seamless is so that the texture which we get is not, it does not look tiled when we tile it, if that makes sense. So I think something like this should be a good texture. Let's get a free one. I think this is free, hopefully. Let's see if it is free or not. Free pick textures are generally free. However, some of them are paid as well. I think that looks good. Yeah, so we can download it for free. However, attribution is required. So all credits go to rawpixel.com. And it is downloading, so I'm just gonna give it a second and I will see when it's done. All right, so the texture has completed downloading, and so what I'm gonna do is that I'm just gonna go to the shading tab. So we were in the layout tab previously, so I'm just gonna go to shading tab, and now we can just select the table, I'm just going to turn on the viewport guides. So now I'm just going to select this table and then we can create a new material. You can also click new right there as well in the material tab, or you can just click it right here. And so basically what we can do is that we can simply just go ahead and drag in that texture. So I'm just going to be dragging this in like that. And then I'm just going to be plugging this into the base color. Now, you must be wondering what exactly this option is for. This was for rendering, right? And this was for your viewport. This is for looking at the materials as they are, right? So now if I just click this, you're going to see that the lighting is going to be different. The lighting is not going to be that realistic. However, we are going to see our texture. And I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? The texture is pretty good. And however, if I just go to the bottom, you're going to see that it is absolutely messed up, right? The texture at the bottom is absolutely messed up. And that's because we don't have it UV unwrapped, right? So I'm not going to go into too much detail about UV unwrapping in this course. However, I'm just going to show you a very, very simple and very basic way to do UV unwrapping on pretty much any object. It works on most objects unless you want to sort of custom UV unwrap it. That's a very advanced thing. I think you shouldn't be worried about that right now. But what you can do is you can simply press tab to go into edit mode. Once you're in edit mode, you can just press A to select everything. And then you can just press U to go into the UV mapping mode. And once you're here, you can just click Smart UV Project. Now this is just going to do it automatically for you. Press OK, and everything is going to be automatically UV unwrapped, right? Now you're going to see that the texture is looking a lot better. Around the edges, it's not that good. However, that is because we have the subdivision surface modifier. If I just go ahead and turn that off, you're going to see that everything is going to become perfectly fine. So that's just a cost which you have to sort of bear if you're using the subdivision surface modifier. And we're going to place our camera in such a way that that side is not visible, right? So I'm just going to go back to my layout mode. Let's actually go to our camera. Let's go to the rendered view and let's see how it looks. I think it looks pretty decent. However, the wood doesn't really look that realistic. The reason for that is because the size of the wood texture is too high, too large. So I'm just going to be reducing the size of that. How exactly do we do that? We simply go to the UV editing tab. Once we get there, make sure that your table is selected, by the way. You're going to see that that texture is going to be visible, which we applied. It's going to be visible automatically. And we're going to have this table selected. However, it's going to be in edit mode automatically. So if I press A to select everything, you're going to see that all your UVs, which are unwrapped, are going to be visible here. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what exactly UVs are or how you can sort of modify them. However, what you can do is we can just press A to select everything, right? Then press S to scale it up, something like that. And basically the larger your UVs are relative to your texture, the smaller your texture is going to appear on your object. So if I just go to my material tab, material preview tab, you're going to see that I want you guys to focus on this wood right here. So if I scale it down, you're going to see that the wood texture is going to become larger. But if I scale it up, you're going to see that it's going to become smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's exactly what you want. And so let's go back to our layout mode. Right now, you're going to see that it is looking a lot better, right? The scale is perfectly fine. And I'm just going to be rotating this that way. Or maybe what we can do is we can change the position of our camera. So I'm just going to select my camera. Let's go here, view, lock camera to view. I think we should maybe place it somewhere there. I think that you can just try to sort of play around with this and see what looks the most realistic. With HDRIs, you're going to face a lot of, what do you call it? A lot of uncertainty. It's going to look completely different from one side and completely different from the other. So you just have to go ahead and sort of eyeball it and just see what looks good. And now we can go ahead and rotate our camera, rotate our table as well, something like that. And I think it looks pretty good, looks pretty decent. Now, one thing which we are missing is depth of field. We want depth of field, which basically means that you want the background of this scene to be blur, right? Because the background is perfectly in focus, which makes it look very fake. So the way we add depth of field is by simply going to the camera. And with this, in these camera settings, we can just simply go ahead and turn on depth of field. And now we're going to have to select a focus object, basically. And that focus object in our case is going to be this Rubik's Cube exactly. And so right now you're going to see that the background is going to become slightly blur. However, if you want to make it more blur, you can turn down this f-stop. If you bring it to pretty much 0.1, then it's going to become very, very shallow. The depth of field is going to become very shallow. However, if I set it to something more realistic, something like 1.8, now you're going to see that it looks really nice. Let's turn off our viewport guides so that we can just let it render, and let's see how it looks in actual. So I think it looks pretty decent. one thing which I do want to do is that I want to increase the amount of beveling that we're doing. So I'm just going to select my cube. And this is the benefit of using modifiers, by the way. You could just simply go ahead and modify the amount of beveling or anything which you do with modifiers. And it's very, very convenient. I think 0.15. Yeah, I think that is a lot better. Yeah, that's better. So now we can just go ahead, and also one thing which I'm going to do is that I can reduce the roughness of this. And then we can reduce the roughness of this as well. Also, if this doesn't look realistic enough for you, what you can do is you can add a normal map to these, to these colors, right? So how exactly do we do that? It's very simple, actually. We just go to the internet, and then we're going to be searching for plastic normal map. And so if we do that, you're going to see that we're going to find something which is pretty blue, and it basically has a lot of bumps on it. If I just open this image in a new tab, and if I zoom in, you're going to see that this has very minor bumps on it, right? So we want this look to be on our colors, right? So I'm just going to be saving this image, and let's apply this to our scene. Save image. I don't know why it's not saving it. But anyways, let's try from here, normal, and it's going to save it. Never mind. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select one of these colors. We're going to be applying it to all of them individually, but for now, just one of them. And so in this, we have this normal tab, a normal input, which we can just plug this normal output to. It's actually pretty simple. We don't really need to do anything. So we just plug this in, and then I'm just going to press Shift A, and then I'm going to search for normal map. And then we're just going to be dropping this in middle of this. And let's make this non-color as well. And now if I just go very close to this, you're going to see that it has very minor bumps. And if you want to sort of make these larger, that is pretty simple as well. If you look at it from this angle, I think it's a lot more visible. You're going to see that it has these bumps, which makes it look very realistic. Let's see how it looks in the actual render. Zoom in. Let's see if we need to scale it up or not. But I'm going to show you how to scale it up either way. I think we do need to scale it up, yeah. The way we do that is pretty simple. We just select our object. You go into the UV editing tab, and then we can just select this, or press A to select everything. And then I'm just going to be going close to my object just so that I can see it properly. If I scale it up, you're going to see that the texture is going to scale down. However, if I scale it down, it's going to become pretty large. And we can also go ahead and increase the roughness slightly, because I think this is a lot more realistic. And then we can just go ahead and adjust the size. I think something like that should be good. Let's see how it looks in our final rendered view. Let's wait for it to render. Right now it is looking very fake because it is not rendered completely. Let's render it a little bit, and then we'll see how it is looking. All right, so I think this looks really nice now. I think the normal map is really adding a lot. So now let's go ahead and do the same exact thing on other materials as well. So I'm just going to go back to my shading tab, and here I can just go to the material preview mode because I think that is enough. Now I can just select this texture, and then I can just copy this whole thing. Just select both of them and press Ctrl C. Let's go to this material and let's apply it right here. And let's go to this. Let's apply it right here as well. You can do it with others as well, but I'm just not going to do with the other ones because they're not visible in our scene. So I think, yeah. Now what we can do is we can just select this object, go into the UV editing tab, and then we're going to have to eyeball this. So just scale it down just so that it is similar in scale to the other one. Perfect. Now let's go back to our layout mode. Let's select this one. Let's go back to our UV editing mode. Select everything, scale it down. And I think something like that should be good. Roughness, I'm going to increase it as well. Let's go back to the layout mode and let's select this. Make sure that the roughness is high in this as well, something like that. And yeah, I think our scene is looking pretty decent. One thing which I am going to do is that I'm going to be setting my depth of field f-stop to 1.2 instead of 1.8 because I think this more depth of field looks a lot more realistic in this specific scene. So yeah, let's go ahead and render this out and then we'll see how it looks. So I'm just going to go to my render properties. Let's make sure that our max samples are 1000, and you can also set this to very high contrast if you want, but I think none is very flat. Obviously high contrast is I think the sweet spot, or medium high contrast. But yeah, I think we're good. We're looking good with this. So I can just go ahead and render image, and be sure to save everything before rendering it, because Blender can crash while rendering. I am speaking from experience, by the way. So yeah. Also, make sure that your denoise is turned on in your render. It is turned on by default, but make sure that it is turned on if it isn't, just in case. Yeah, I think, all right, so now the rendering is complete. Now we can just go to image, save as, and then you can just send it to your iPhone or do whatever you want. And I usually like to edit my renders on my iPhone, because I think the iPhone editing app is really good, the default one. So I can just go ahead and name it Rubik's Cube, of course. Perfect. So that's our render. If you were following this tutorial and if you followed it successfully, then congratulations. I'm really proud of you. And if you were not able to do that, it's perfectly fine. You will get the hang of Blender eventually. Don't worry about anything. Be sure to continue to make these projects and just don't give up. You will eventually get there. All right. Thanks so for watching this project, and I will see you in the next one. Alright guys, so we are inside the beautiful world of Blender 3D, and here we're going to be creating that amazing 3D model which you saw in the intro. Now the design for this 3D model is inspired by my fellow creator Amritpal Singh, so yeah, a huge shout out to him. Okay, so let's begin, and let's actually just delete the default light and delete the default camera, and we are going to be working with the default cube. Okay, so with this we're going to be making the face, so I'm just going to go to front view, and let's actually scale it down slightly in the Z-axis. So something like that should be good. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, now what we want to do is that let's actually just make it let's scale it down in this axis as well, something like that. Yeah, so this is going to be our face. This is going to be the front of our face. So the thing is, I want to smooth this cube, right? Now either we could just select this and go to the modifier menu, and we could select a subdivision surface, and that would do the job. For example, like if we increase the segments, and if we went to edit mode and we added loop cuts and stuff, but that's just going to make it very complicated, and it's not going to give us that great results either. Okay, the results are not going to be accurate. Okay, it's not going to have an accurate amount of accurate amount of smoothing from all sides. Okay, so we're not going to use that. Okay, so I'm just going to delete the subdivision surface, and with this cube selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edit mode, and we're going to be using something known as bevel. Okay, now I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with bevel, but if you're not, then I'm just going to be telling you how it works in just a second. So first of all, let's go to the edge select mode by either pressing this button right here, or by pressing by pressing 2 on your keyboard. And with this, what we can do is that we can like select all these edges. So just select one, and we can press A to select all the edges. So with all these edges selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pressing Ctrl B on my keyboard, and I'm going to see that this dotted line is appearing. And if I move it further, you can see that we are adding a bevel. Now we can make it however big we want. I'm just going to make it somewhere like something like that. And right now you can see if I left click my mouse button, you're going to see that we only have one segment. Okay, but we want more of them. We want it to be smooth. Okay, so I'm just going to Ctrl Z, undo it. And next what we're going to be doing is that let's just do the bevel again, but this time with this this much selected, I'm just going to move my scroll wheel up, and that's going to add new segments. So I'm just going to set the segments to like 10. You can see on the bottom of the screen the segments are visible. So I'm just going to set it to 10, and the smoothing is going to be something like this. Yeah, that much should be good. Perfect. So now our cube is ready, and what I'm going to do real quick is that we can shade this smooth. So right now you can see that this has a lot of these sharp edges. So I'm just going to select it, and I'm going to right click and shade smooth, and I'm going to see none of those are visible. Perfect. So next what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be creating the helmet, and for that we're going to be using the same exact cube so that we don't have to like smooth it again and again. So yeah, with this selected, I'm just going to press Shift D, and now you're going to see that we have duplicated it, and we can move it anywhere we want. However, I'm just going to right click my mouse button, so that's just going to drop it right where it was. So now you're going to see that we have two cubes, cube and cube 001. So this one, I'm just going to scale it up slightly, and I'm going to move it back. Now I'm going to tell you the reason for moving it back in just a second. So I'm just going to go to the front view, and now you're going to see that this is it, and I'm just going to scale it up something like that probably. And I'm going to scale it up in the Z axis, so something like that, and I'm going to be moving it up. So I'm just going to scale it up slightly, a little more, just perfect, cool. So yeah, I'm just going to scale it down actually, just something like that should be good. Yeah, perfect. So now we have our helmet, and the thing is we want to cut this shape out from this shape. Okay, so so basically we can create a hole for this face. And by the way, just a reminder, save your project. Yeah, so coming back to this, what we can do is that we can select this and we can use a modifier called a Boolean modifier. Now what a Boolean modifier does is that, let me just add it and then I'm going to explain how it works. So I'm just going to select this and I'm going to add a modifier, Boolean modifier, perfect. Now the Boolean modifier has three options. One is intersect, the other is union, and the last one is difference. So what intersect does is that if we select this, it's only going to display the intersection of these two objects, okay? And what union does is that it's going to display both of the objects, and what difference does is that it's going to display the difference of two objects, right? So basically we're going to subtract this object from this object, okay? Perfect. So with this selected, with this in this Boolean modifier, we're going to select an object which we want to subtract, okay? With this difference set, by the way. And so we're just going to pick this eyedropper tool and we're going to select this cube right here, and I'm going to see that it has been cut. The way we know that is because the shading has become slightly weird. So to fix that, first of all, I'm just going to select this and I'm going to right click and shade flat. So we're going to be shading it smooth after we apply the Boolean modifier. So yeah, now that shading problem is fixed, and right now it has been this object has been cut from that object. But the reason why we're not seeing it is because we have not actually removed this object, right? Okay. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply this Boolean modifier by pressing this down button right here and apply. So now it's going to be applied, and now if I move it away, you're going to see that we have this hole. Perfect. Cool. So I'm just going to Control Z, undo that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it down ever so slightly so that we actually know that there is a hole for that face. So now what we're going to be doing is that let's actually move this behind for now so that it's not disturbing us. And we're going to be adding a bevel to this edge as well. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to edit mode. And with this, all the edges are selected for now, but I'm going to unselect all the edges. And I'm just going to select one of these and I'm going to press Alt and I'm just going to press this, okay? And now what that's going to do is that it's going to basically, what it's going to do is that it is going to select the whole edge loop. Okay, so you can press Alt and then you can press any edge to select the whole edge loop. Okay, now either we could select this edge and press Shift and select these individual edges, but that's going to be very, very time consuming and it's going to be very inefficient as well. So I'm just going to press Alt and select it, and I'm going to see that these bottom edges are not selected for some reason because this edge loop has basically been diverted off to this side. So I'm just going to press Shift and I'm going to unselect this, deselect that, and I'm going to select these edges right here, and I'm going to just complete my loop selection. And perfect. So now our whole edge loop is selected, and with that selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl B again on my keyboard. So to bevel this, I'm going to bevel it ever so slightly, just slightly. Something like that should be good. Now let's go back to our object mode, and now you're going to see that it, although it's not making a huge difference, it is making it look quite good. So now once that's done, I'm just going to right click it and shade smooth, and that's going to be perfect. Now let's move this face forward, and I'm just going to go to my side view and I'm going to align it properly, just so it's like extruding out ever so slightly. Yeah, that should be perfect. Cool. So next up, we're going to be working on the face, the face itself. So we're going to be adding the nose, the eyes and everything. Okay, and for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all select add and mesh, and I'm going to select a UV sphere. Now this, what we're going to be doing with this sphere is that we're going to be creating the nose, and we're not going to be worrying about the segments that much because it's going to be very small, and we're going to be shading it smooth anyway. So yeah, the default segments are perfect. I'm going to move it forward. Let's go to the side view. Let's align it something like that. Perfect. And now let's obviously scale it down because it's way too large for a nose. Something like that should be good, probably. Actually, I'm just going to scale it up slightly. Yeah, perfect. So now let's work on the eyes. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be selecting the nose. I'm going to press Shift D, and we're just going to be duplicating it. I just press right click so to reset the position, and I'm going to be moving them something like that, moving the eye somewhere like that. And now I'm going to go to my scale tool, and I'm going to scale it down in this axis and in this axis as well, something like that. Perfect. So now to make the other eye, we could either press Shift D, duplicate it, and just move it over. However, the problem with there are basically two problems with this approach. Okay, first of all, if I want to make adjustments to this eye, or if I want to move it up and down, then we're going to have to do the same with the other one as well. Okay, and the second problem with this approach is that the distance between the nose and the eyes are not going to be same. Like the distance from here to here is going to be slightly different than the distance from here to here, and we want that to be accurate basically, to give it a more professional look. Okay, but by the way, just save your project. So for that, we're going to be using a modifier called a mirror modifier. Okay, so I'm just going to select this object and I'm going to go to add modifier, and we're going to be adding a mirror modifier. Perfect. So for this, now you're going to see that nothing is basically happening, and that's because we haven't really set a a mirror object. Okay, so I'm just going to select this and I'm going to select the mirror object to this cube. Now the mirror object, what it basically does is that it's the object on which your 3D or your mesh is mirrored onto. Okay, so we just set it to our face. Perfect. And now you're going to see that it is mirroring. However, it's mirroring in the wrong axis. So you're going to see that another one of that eye is visible there. So we're going to be deselecting the x-axis and we're going to be selecting the y-axis. Okay, and I'm going to see that it's going to be perfectly visible. Now I'm just going to go to the side view, and our eyes are not flushed with our face, so I'm just going to flush them in. Perfect. And now I'm just going to scale them up slightly, ever so slightly. Yep, that's perfect. And apart from that, yeah, let's work on the lips and the eyebrows now. So for the lips and the eyebrows, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be using a torus. Okay, and so I'm just going to add a torus, add a mesh torus. Perfect. Now right now, if I move it forward, you're going to see that it is basically a full torus, right? So I'm just going to be rotate. Actually, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be undoing this and I'm going to be adding another torus so that we can actually work with the parameters. So I'm just going to press this button right here, add torus, and now we're going to be basically decreasing the major radius and the minor radius as well. So something like that should be good. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, so now I'm just gonna bring it forward, and I'm gonna see that this is a full torus. So first of all, I'm gonna rotate it in the y-axis, so 90 degrees, and the way I rotate exactly 90 degrees is by holding control on my keyboard. So if I hold control, you're going to see that it's going to rotate in increments of 5, which makes it really easy to rotate it exactly 90 degrees. So once it's done, next up what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be scaling it down, of course, and we're going to be moving it down, something like that. Now the thing is, we want to basically get rid of half of this torus, right? Actually, in fact, a little more than half, right? So what we're going to be doing is that with this torus selected, we're going to be going to edit mode. And here what we can do is that we can select individual edges and we can delete them. Perfect. So I'm just gonna first of all, let's go to X-ray mode, otherwise it's not going to select the edges on the other side. So I'm just gonna select something like that maybe. Yeah, actually I'm just gonna select even more, so something like that. Yeah, perfect. I'm just gonna select that and I'm gonna delete it, vertices, and I'm going to see that we have the smile. Perfect. But the problem with this is that if I turn off the X-ray mode, you're going to see that these ends do not have faces. Okay, so to fix that, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be alt selecting this edge loop right here, and we're going to be pressing shift and alt, and we're going to be selecting this edge loop right here as well. So with these selected, I'm just going to press F on my keyboard. So what that's going to do is that it's going to create a face. Okay, and that's exactly what we want. But right now, another problem you're going to be noticing is that it's very sharp and edgy, right? So to fix that, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be adding a a subdivision surface. I'm just going to go to add modifier, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface, and with the selected, I'm just going to increase the viewports, because why not, and the levels to something like, let's say 3, and we're going to be shading it smooth as well to make it perfect. And now let's I think it looks pretty good, and I'm just going to go to the side view and I'm going to flush it in with the face. Yeah, something like that should be good. Let me just decrease the size, something like that should be good. Now for the eyebrows, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to scale it down even more, because why not. Yeah, so for the eyebrows, I'm just going to duplicate this and I'm going to move it up, and here we are going to be rotating this, so something like 180 degrees should be good. But this, we are going to be decreasing the size even more, and actually we're going to be scaling it up in this axis, because to add some like variation. Yeah, something like that should be good. Let me just move it up. Perfect. Now to add the other eyebrow, I'm going to use another mirror modifier. So I'm just going to select this, and we are going to be going to the add modifier menu, mirror modifier. Let's set the mirror object to this cube, because we're going to be duplicating this on equally across this cube. And we're just going to deselect the x-axis, and we're going to be selecting the y-axis, and now you're going to see that it's going to look very good. Perfect. So apart from that, I think our face is basically done, and I'm just gonna move it slightly there because I don't think it was aligned properly. Okay, yeah, so that is done, and let's actually now work on our ears. So for the ears, what I'm going to do is that I am going to be, first of all, adding a cylinder. Okay, so I'm just going to be adding a cylinder, and I'm going to be moving off to the side. Let's scale it down, and let's actually rotate it in the x-axis, exactly 90 degrees. So yeah, that is perfect. Now let's go to the front view, and let's see, oops, my bad, I apologize. Let's go to the front view, and let's scale it down. And let's bring it somewhere like that. And that's going to be our ear, but right now it's way too like sharp. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is first of all, I'm going to be, let's actually bring it out a little bit. I'm just going to go to the edit mode, and I'm just going to select this edge loop right here. Now, obviously we could select these edges by pressing shift. However, I'm just going to press alt and select any of these. So we're going to see that it has selected all the whole edge loop. And now let's just press Control B and let's bevel it. So something like that should be good. Yeah, perfect. So I'm just gonna go back to object mode, and now we're gonna be right click and shading it smooth. And yeah, perfect. So apart from that, I'm just gonna duplicate this one more time. So just move it out, and I'm gonna be scaling it down. And we are going to be actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be pushing this out a little bit, slightly. Yeah, that should be a good ear. Perfect. And apart from that, we are going to be duplicating this ear once again. So I'm just making sure that everything is flush with our face. The eyebrows are not. I'm just going to select this, and I'm going to move it slightly back. Yeah, no, it's perfect. Cool. So to duplicate these on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these, and I'm going to add a modifier. And we're just doing the same thing which we have done multiple times in this tutorial, mirror modifier. And we are going to be setting the mirror object to be this larger cube. And I'm just going to select the y-axis. Perfect. So now I'm going to select this, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with this as well. Mirror modifier, object should be this, and instead of the x-axis, we're going to mirror it on the y-axis. And now you're going to see that it looks pretty good. Perfect. So next up, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be working on the neck. So for the neck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding another cube, and we're going to be moving it down. Let's go to the front view. Something like that should be good, and I'm going to scale it up in the z-axis, and let's scale it up like that as well. I think something like that should be good. Let's move it up, and now we're going to be basically beveling this on these four edges only. Okay, so I'm just going to select this, and I'm going to be going to edit mode. So I'm just going to go to the x-ray mode, and I'm going to select this edge, hold shift, this edge, and this edge. So with all these edges selected, I'm just going to press Control B, and I'm going to bevel it. Something like that should be good. Let's go back to object mode, and let's turn off the x-ray mode. Oops. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be scaling it down, something like that. Yeah, perfect. So now I think it looks pretty good. And next up, on the bottom of this neck, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be adding a torus. So I'm just gonna move this torus down, and I'm gonna scale it down as well. Actually, this is way too thin for a torus, so I'm just gonna undo this, and I'm gonna add another one, torus, and let's increase the minor radius. Let's increase it to something like that. Actually, slightly even more. Yeah, that should be good. Perfect. I'm just gonna bring it down, scale it down, and it should be something like that. And below this, it's basically going to be our what do you call it, our body. Okay, so I'm just gonna, for that body, I'm just gonna add another cube, and I'm just gonna move it down. So something like that should be perfect. Yeah, cool. So we are going to be increasing it in this axis. Cool. Yeah, perfect. So I'm just gonna increase the size of the body like that as well, because obviously the body has to be larger than the face. Yeah. Okay, cool. So oops, just press Control S to save your project. And now with this cube selected, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go back to edit mode, and we're going to be selecting these two edges, this edge and this edge, and we're going to be beveling it. But the reason why we're beveling this first and alone is because we want to bevel it more than the other edges. So I'm just going to bevel it, this one, something like that. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting just one edge and pressing A to bevel all of these. And I'm going to press Control B. And I'm going to see that it's going to bevel everything. Okay, cool. Now I'm just going to go back to object mode. And you can see this is looking slightly weird. So I'm just going to go back and I'm not going to select these edges, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to alt select this edge loop right here, and I'm going to alt select the, and I'm going to shift and alt select this edge loop right here as well. Okay, so with these selected, I'm going to press Control B and I'm going to bevel it something like that. Perfect. So now that's going to get rid of that issue, and I'm going to right click it and I'm going to shade smooth as well. But right now you can see that this is it's like behaving slightly weird with this shade smooth, right? It's basically, if I shade it flat, you're going to see that it's basically it doesn't have any shading. However, if I shade it smooth, the shading is kind of weird, okay? So to fix that, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be adding a modifier which is called a edge split modifier. Okay, so once we add that, you're going to see that it's going to be smooth, and it's going to get rid of that shading problem as well. So that's pretty cool. And once that's done, yeah, so next up what we're going to be doing is that let's just shade smooth this as well. And let's take this torus and shade it smooth as well. And we're going to be adding a, what do you call it? This edge split modifier to this as well. However, it's not looking really good, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I think the shading is pretty good. Perfect. So now next up what we're going to be doing is that let's work on the earrings. Okay, so this robot is pretty cool. And it's going to have earrings because why not? So yeah, for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be taking a cylinder, but instead of creating a new one, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be duplicating one of these. And the reason for that is because we only have to do it on one side, and it's going to be automatically duplicated to the other side as well, because we already do have a mirror modifier applied. So you can see that this also has that shading problem. So I'm just going to add an edge split modifier to this as well, and you're going to see it's fixed. Perfect. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be scaling it. I'm going to be rotating it in the x-axis exactly 90 degrees. Perfect. And now I'm going to be scaling it down, of course, something like that, and I'm going to be scaling it up like that quite a lot. Something like that should be good. And I'm going to place this trimmer right there because these are going to be the earrings. Oops, I'm just going to scale it down in these two axes. Something like that should be good. I'm going to move it up, and yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. So next up what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be creating the actual shape, which is going to be the earring. Perfect. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be creating another cube, and I'm just going to move this cube aside for now, and we're going to be working with the edges. Okay, so we basically want to create a lightning bolt for this, because why not? And I'm just going to with this cube selected, I'm just going to go to edit mode, select this cube and go to edit mode. And with these edges selected, I'm just going to go to the vertex select mode first, and let's actually just shape that lightning bolt out. So I'm just going to select this. Oops. Now the reason why that weird thing happened, was because I only had these two edges selected, and although I selected this whole edge, this whole area, because we didn't have our X-ray mode on, it selected only the edges which were visible. I'm just going to select that. I'm just going to turn that X-ray mode on, and I'm going to see that if I select this, it's going to select one on both the edges as well. Perfect. So now I'm just going to move this up. Let's bring this down, and let's take this somewhere like that. I'm going to move these both closer. So this should be something like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this whole bottom area, and I'm going to press E for extrude. Okay, so it's going to extrude it, and I'm just going to press it. I'm just going to extrude it something like that. Something like that should be good. And I'm going to be taking this there, and I'm going to be taking this there. And now we're going to be selecting this, and we're going to be holding shift and selecting that, and we're going to be extruding it once again. So this time we're going to be like taking these to the bottom. I think that should be a good shape, isn't it? I'm just going to take this slightly there, and yeah, that is perfect. So I'm just going to bring these both these edges closer to each other, that it looks good, and that is perfect. Cool. So next up, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go to object mode again, and I'm just going to get rid of that ugly shading mode, and I'm going to scale it down like that. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding bevel to this as well. I'm just going to go to edit mode again, and I'm going to select this edge loop. Oops. I'm just going to go to edge, and I'm going to select this edge loop right here. So yeah, that and that as well, this whole edge loop. And I'm going to be shift selecting this edge loop as well. So those two sides are selected, and with those selected, I'm just going to press Ctrl B, and I'm going to bevel them just ever so slightly, something like that should be good. And I'm just going to right click and shade it smooth as well, and I'm going to add a edge split modifier as well. Perfect. So yeah, now let's just add these earrings on to our beautiful robot. I'm just going to scale it down, something like that. Let's scale it up. Let's move them up as well. Yeah, so that should be pretty good. And now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be duplicating this. We're going to be duplicating this, and we're going to be just bringing them slightly forward, and we're going to be scaling them down. So I'm just going to do this in front view mode. Just not scaling down properly. So to fix that, what we can do is that, actually I think it's good, pretty good. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I'm just going to be scaling it down again. And we're going to be bringing it here, and let's scale it down again. Oops, I did not duplicate this one. Oops, what am I doing? Yeah, so that should be good. And I'm gonna duplicate it once again, and I'm gonna be scaling it down again and moving it forward. So something like that should be good. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good design for a earring. Yeah, perfect. So what I'm going to do is that right now you're going to see that all these are separate objects. Now obviously we could add a mirror modifier to all these objects separately, but instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to group these all into one object, and that's going to make our lives much easier. So we basically want to join these objects into one. So I'm just going to select all these, and with all these selected, I'm just going to press Ctrl J. So that's just going to convert it into one mesh. Okay, so with this mesh selected, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding a modifier to this, and that modifier is going to be the mirror modifier, of course. And we're going to be selecting the object to be this cube right here, and we're going to set it to y-axis. Now you're going to see that our amazing earring has been applied to both sides, which is pretty cool. Okay, so once that is done, we're going to be moving on to the next step, which is actually working on the body. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go to the front view, and we are going to be adding a joystick, basically joypad to this. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be selecting a cube for now, and we're going to be moving it to the side so that we can actually work with this. And okay, so next up what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go to edit mode. So let's move this cube to the side, and let's turn on our X-ray mode, and let's go to our edit mode. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all go to this vertex select mode, and I'm just going to select the top ones, and we're going to be extruding them, something like that. And we're going to be extruding all these sides to basically make the joypad, right? Something like that, and something like that. We can obviously tweak the sides and tweak the size of the sides later on by these move tools, but I think that should be pretty good. Just eyeball them. It doesn't need to be exactly precise or anything like that. So next up what we're going to be doing is that let's get out of our X-ray mode and edit mode, and I'm going to be yeah, I think the thickness is fine. Let me just reduce it slightly. And so next what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be adding a torus on this. So instead of creating a new one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, and I'm going to shift D, duplicate it, and I'm going to like move it over. And this we're going to be rotating it in the y-axis. Oops, rotate in the y-axis exactly 90 degrees. Perfect. I'm just going to increase the scale, something like that should be good. Let's move it to the center. I think that should be good. Yeah. So next up, what we're going to be doing is that, yeah, actually, let's just first flush this in. Perfect. So next up, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be working on these arrow keys. So I'm just going to add a, let's just add a cube, and we're going to be moving it here. I'm going to be scaling it down, something like that. Let's move it forward. Something like that should be good. So it's just extruding slightly. And now we're going to select this. We're going to go to extrude mode, and inside edit mode, we're going to be selecting these two edges, and we're going to be scaling them down. So right now the problem with that is that it's actually scaling them down in all axes, okay? And we don't really want that. So what we want is that we should only scale them down in like this axis, okay? The y-axis. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to scale it down in the y-axis. Let's zoom in so that we can get precise. Something like that should be good. Now actually let's bevel this as well. So I'm just going to go to edge select mode, and I'm going to select this edge loop right here. Oops. I'm going to select all these edges, and I'm going to press Ctrl B, and I'm going to bevel it just slightly. Actually, I'm just going to bevel it something like that. Yeah, perfect, cool. So next up, I'm just going to what do you call it? Yeah, actually, let's just scale it down, something like that. Yeah, so something like that should be a good arrow button. And now I'm just gonna duplicate this, and instead of duplicating it, I'm gonna use the mirror modifier once again. So I'm just gonna select this, add a modifier, mirror modifier, and this object is obviously gonna be this one. And let's set it to what do you call it? Let's set it to z-axis for now. And you're gonna see that this is basically mirrored onto one side. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shift D, duplicate this, and I'm gonna rotate this exactly 90 degrees, and I'm going to move it right there. And then I'm just going to, instead of the z-axis, I'm going to set it to y-axis, so it's going to duplicate like that as well. So let's actually increase the scale of these. Oops, I'm just going to select one, and I'm going to increase the scale, something like that, and I'm going to select these and increase the scale as well. So yeah, you don't need to be exactly precise because it doesn't really matter. People are not going to notice it. And I'm just going to select all these now. And let's just, instead of that, I'm just gonna scale it first. So first I'm gonna scale it down, then I'm gonna be moving it over here, and I'm gonna be scaling it down once again. Let's just scale it up slightly, and it should be good somewhere around here. Let's obviously bring it forward because it's not gonna be visible. Our amazing creation should be visible. And I'm just gonna select this, and I'm gonna be going to the edit mode, and we're gonna be adding a bevel to this as well. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to select all these edges individually because we don't have any edge loops in this. So once these are all selected, I'm going to press Ctrl B, and I'm going to bevel it ever so slightly. And that is perfect. Cool. So with that, our joystick is complete, and just be sure to save your project because we've made quite a lot of progress. And I don't want you to lose it, okay? So yeah, alright guys, so that joystick is done, and now let's work on some buttons. So we're going to be creating some buttons here, and for that what I'm going to do is that first of all, let's just create a new torus, add a mesh, torus. Now this one, the reason why I created a new one instead of just copying these is because I want to reduce the minor radius. Something like that should be good. Yeah, that's perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to rotate it in the y-axis exactly 90 degrees. Perfect. Let's just go to the side view, and let's bring it forward. And now we're going to be obviously scaling it down quite a lot. Yeah, so something like that should be good. Actually, I'm just going to, yeah, so that should be good. Perfect. So next up, we're going to be using a cylinder. Now, do we have a cylinder? Yeah, we do have one right here. So I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm going to bring it forward. And I'm just going to remove this mirror modifier because we don't really need that for now. And you're going to see that shading is pretty weird in this. So I'm just going to add a edge split modifier, and I'm going to rotate it in the z-axis exactly 90 degrees. And I'm going to bring it down somewhere there, and let's just position it properly now. I'm just going to scale it down. So this is just some trial and error, and we're just trying to see which looks good, which scale and which configuration looks good. I think that should be pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. It actually does look like a button. So I'm just gonna select both of these and I'm gonna Shift D, duplicate them, and I'm gonna go to the front view and I'm gonna move this over somewhere around that. Now we are gonna be adding textures to this, so just don't worry about that. And yeah, now let's start working on the arms. Now the arms are gonna be pretty easy. So for that, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be using another what do you call this? A cylinder. Yeah, perfect. So I'm just gonna bring the cylinder right here, and I'm gonna reduce the size, something like that, and I'm gonna be increasing the size in the z-axis, something like that, and I'm going to place it right here. Perfect. Oops, I just misclicked that. I was just trying to press Control S to save my project, and yeah, you should this is a reminder, just save your project as well. So I'm just gonna move this over slightly. And okay, so the cylinder right now, it's way too sharp, so I'm just going to go to the edit mode, and I'm going to be selecting this edge loop right here, this top one, and I'm going to be adding a bevel. Control B, oops, add a bevel, something like that. I'm going to increase the segments, so something like that should be a good bevel. Oh, just a second. Yeah, maybe something like that should be good. Yeah, something like that should be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going to the object mode, and I'm going to be flushing this in, something like that. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be rotating it slightly, and I'm going to be moving it in. So yeah, those are going to be our hands, and I'm going to move it out slightly, because why not? Yeah, I think that should be good. And I'm going to add a mirror modifier to this as well. So the object this time is going to be this body, and I'm going to set it to y-axis. Yeah, it's perfect. So we're not going to be making anything below that, because our frame is going to be basically, it's going to be cut off at this point. Yeah, so I think it looks pretty good till then. And apart from that, let's work on some other things. Yeah, some minor details. For example, let's add a I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I'm just going to add it and you guys can see what is it. I'm just going to add a torus, increase the, oops, my bad. I'm going to add another one because the settings just disappeared for some reason. I'm going to increase it something like that. And now I'm going to move it up. I'm going to make it something like that. Yeah, so that should be good. And I'm not exactly sure what that's called, but yeah, it is what it is. And if any one of you knows what this actually is, just be sure to let me know somehow. Yeah, because I really want to know. Anyways, so I'm just going to shade the smooth. And yeah, perfect. Apart from that, let's try adding a split modifier to this. But no, it's going to make it look weird, so I'm not going to add that. Anyway, so everything is looking pretty good, isn't it? Basically our whole model is complete. And let me just check. Yeah, so for some minor detail, let's just add some of these toruses down here. I'm going to scale them down, and I'm going to rotate them slightly, and let's move them forward. Something like that should be good. Yeah, that should be perfect. Now let's duplicate these, bring them down, duplicate them once again, bring them down, and we're going to have 4 of these. That should be good. And now we're going to duplicate this on the other side as well, but let's just make sure that there is no gap between them, because any gap is going to look very bad. I'm just going to move them up close. Yeah, perfect. So I'm just going to move it down, something like that. Something like that. That should be perfect. Yeah. So I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm going to press Ctrl J to join them into one object. And now that one object is going to be duplicated on the other side as well. So I'm just going to add a modifier. This time we're going to be adding a mirror modifier, and the object, of course, is going to be this, and the y-axis. Okay, so perfect. So basically our frame is going to be down till there, something like that. Yeah, so actually let's just set up our camera for now, so that we can actually work on the texturing and the lighting and everything. So let's set up our camera. Okay, so I'm just going to add a new camera, and I'm just going to move it back. Now right now you're going to see that we're not actually looking at the world from the eye of the camera, and the reason for that is because we're not inside the camera. And to go inside the camera, we can just press this button right here, and now you can see that we are inside the camera. However, if I want to move this camera, if I move my view, you're going to see that we actually get out of our camera. And I want to be able to position our camera like that. Okay, so I'm just going to press this open up menu right here, and we're going to go down to view and camera. We're going to lock camera to view. Now what that's going to do is that if we go inside the camera and if you move our view, you're going to see that it's going to be locked to that view, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so that is perfect. And apart from that, let's just close this. Let's actually not close this because we're going to unlock it once we have set our camera. And okay, so next up what we're going to be doing is that we are, first of all, let's go to the output properties. Output properties, yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, output properties. And the Y we're going to increase something like, let's say 2000. Yeah, because we want it to be a vertical render, right? So we're going to be making something like that. And however, let's just go to our camera settings and let's increase the focal length to something like, say 200 millimeters, because we want it to be very you want it to be very like flat. Okay, exactly, perfect. I'm just gonna make it something like that. I think that should be good. I think that should be a good frame, something like that. We can obviously crop it later on in post-production. However, like in our post-processing, not post-production, my bad, in our post-processing section, but I think that should be good. That's a pretty good frame. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna rotate it in the y-axis slightly, so that it looks as if it's so that it looks slightly more angled, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that should be our frame, and I'm gonna unlock it so that we don't actually accidentally move our camera. I'm just gonna close that, and I'm gonna see that our camera is set up perfectly, and we can just view our camera, and yeah, there it is. So now let's start working on the lighting part. Okay, so for the lighting part, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be using an HDRI. Now what an HDRI is that if I just Google it, you're going to see that, oops, HDRI, you're going to see that these are basically 360-degree images of the real world, which you can use to light your own scene. And the reason why we use these is because they're high dynamic range, okay, and they provide you with very realistic lighting. Yeah, so to download HDRIs, what I recommend is use this website, Polyhaven, because they just provide you free HDRIs. You don't have to pay anything, although you can use any of these other websites as well. However, they might charge you money. Okay, so I'm just going to browse HDRIs, and you can just download any of these. But however, I do already have a HDRI collection saved, so I'm just going to use that. So first of all, let me just now to actually add an HDRI, what we're going to be doing is that let's just go to our camera first, and to add an HDRI, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go to the world properties, and here inside this color, we're going to press this yellow dot right here, and we can add an environment texture. Now what an environment texture is that basically all your HDRIs in Blender go inside your environment texture. And by the way, I just noticed that this was not smooth, so I'm just going to shade it smooth real quick. Yeah, okay, so back to this environment texture thing. We can open an HDRI in this. So I'm just going to go to HDRI library, and the one which I think we should use for this, let's try Home 2, and I'm just going to render this. But right now you're going to see that it's not going to look very good. The reason for that is because we are inside Eevee Render Engine. And let's switch to Cycles, and I'm going to see that it's looking pretty good, isn't it? However, the thing is that this area is way too dark, and that area is way too bright. So I'm just going to change the HDRI. I'm going to remove that. Let's open another one. Let's try Home 1, because why not? I think that is much better. That is much better. The lighting is very even, and we are going to get some reflections as well. However, let me just try others as well, because why not? Outdoor Sun, I'm just going to skip these. Actually, let me just try them, because why not? Nah, it doesn't look very good. Because in outdoor scenes, what happens is that the shadows are very harsh, right? They're very harsh and very, like, yeah, this one is pretty smooth, isn't it? Yeah, I like that the best, honestly. Yeah, but usually what happens in outdoor scenes, for example, like you're going to see in this road, the shadows are going to be very harsh, okay? And that's not exactly what we want. We want this to have very, like, soft shadows, and we can also use Studio One for that. Studio lighting is pretty good for our scene. However, I'm just going to stick with this Outdoor Sun 2, I think that was it. Nope, it was Outdoor Sun 1. Yeah, the perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna stick with that for now, and we can obviously change it later on if we want. But yeah, cool. So next up, I think our lighting is basically done for now, and what we're gonna be doing next is that we're gonna be working on the textures. So I'm just gonna go to this viewport shading mode for the textures, and here we can add the textures. However, we can also freely move our camera, and we can see the texture updates in real time. Whereas if I go to this, you're gonna see that it's gonna lag a lot. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to this viewport shading mode. And let's just go to our camera and let's start adding the textures. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding a something like a light blue color to this helmet, I guess. So I'm just going to try a light blue color. So I'm just going to go to this material properties, and we already do have a material, so I'm just going to name it light blue. Light blue, and the base color is obviously going to be, you guessed it, light blue. And right now the thing is this and that also both have the same material applied, right? So I'm just going to remove this material from this center face, so that we are only applying it to that, and something like that should be good. Let's add something like that. How about that? And I'm going to be reducing the roughness because we want it to be pretty shiny. And let's render it and let's see how it looks. So the goal with our 3D model is to make it look like a toy, basically a realistic toy, okay? And for that, we are going to be adding some reflections as well. Okay, so yeah, I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? So next up, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be adding a skin material to this. So I'm just going to open a new material, and we're going to be setting it to something like a very light skin color. I think something like that should be good. How about something like that? Let's actually grab a skin texture from the internet. Skin color code. So let's go to images, and let's do something like that. So F1C27D, right? F1C27D. Inside this X, I'm gonna go F1C270. I think that was it. And it's a little too dark, isn't it? Yeah, let's just see how it looks. Let's just render it and let's see how it looks. Nope, it's way too dark. So let's just make it brighter, I guess. One thing which we can do is that we can actually, if I go to my viewport shading mode, if we can move this slightly back, that's gonna give it some shadows and everything, which is gonna make it look much better, I think. I'm just gonna select these as well, and let's move these back as well, so that they're basically flushed with the face. Let's go back to our camera and let's see how it looks. Yeah, so I think that is better. When it's back, it's casting more shadows and it's making it look more realistic. However, I'm not sure about the, the skin color for now. I am going to set it to maybe something like that. Yeah, we're going to be working on the skin color later on. So let's reduce the roughness slightly. Yeah, so I think that's just good for now, but we are going to be tweaking it later on if we don't think that is looking good. Anyway, so let's go back to our viewport shading mode and let's add a material to this body. So I'm going to add another material. So I'm not sure about the color. Let's see which one looks the best. How about something like a dark purple? Maybe a green. I think a pink should be good, probably. Something like that, a dark pink. A dark purple, maybe. Let's try that and let's see how it looks. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to reduce the roughness, of course, because we want to give it a toy look. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? So I'm going to change the color of this helmet to, I don't know, maybe a red. How about a red? Nope, that is looking terrible. So we want to give it like very bright colors, because we want it to be very like good looking. Okay, yeah, I think that should be good for now, but we are going to be making tweaks later on if we feel like it. So to this I'm going to add that same skin material. So I'm going to go to this material library, and we're going to be adding that skin material, and let's just name it skin as well. Skin, perfect. And let's add the same material as this helmet to this torus. So this light blue, which is not light blue anymore, so I'm just going to name it pink, or I'm just going to name it helmet material, because we might end up changing it again. Helmet material. Okay, cool. So to these ears, let's add this helmet material to this one, and let's add this material to the other one. How about that? Yeah, I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Apart from that, this ring on the top should have a yellowish material. Let's make it yellow. Let's reduce the roughness so that we are getting reflections and all. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? And apart from that, let's go to this and let's add a material. Let's say, how about we do that helmet material on this? I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? I'm just gonna go back to that viewport shading mode because the other one, the rendered view, is slowing down our viewport quite a lot. So the thing is, if you want to make slight adjustments to this material, right now the problem is that if we change the color of this, you're going to see that it's going to affect the other one as well. And by the way, orange color is also looking pretty good, so we're going to try that later on. But yeah, right now, if you want to make adjustments to only this material, what we can do is that we can press this button right here, and it's going to create a new material from that, right? So we can make adjustments to this one, and it's not going to affect the other one anymore. So let's make it a slightly different material, a different color. How about an orange? Let's make it even more orange, slightly. Something like that. Let's render it and let's see how it looks. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. That looks pretty good. However, I'm going to add the same material to, by the way, just save your project. I'm going to add the same material to these as well. These things as well, because they're basically the part of the same thing, right? Let's go to rendered mode, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? So apart from that, the other materials, yeah, let's add a material to these rings right here, let's add the helmet material to these. Oops, not that cylinder, I meant to select these rings. Let's add the helmet material to this and to this as well. Perfect. And now to these, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be adding an emissive material. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is that let's go to our rendered mode, because so that we can actually see the emission. So inside this emission, I'm going to just set it to white, and then the color I'm going to set it to yellow, slightly yellowish. Okay, so now you're going to see that it's going to emit yellow material, but we're also going to reduce the roughness, and we're going to be increasing the transmission slightly. So that's going to make it look like a glass. Okay, that's basically what we're going for. So the emission is quite a lot right now. I'm just gonna reduce the emission strength, something like 0.3. How about that? Nope. How about we set it to, yeah, actually the base color we're gonna set it to yellow as well, so that we're getting a more yellow effect, if that makes sense. Now we're gonna increase the strength, something like that. Let's set it to, let's say 5. Oops, not 5, I meant 0.5. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so in the other one, we're gonna add a pink tint to. I'm just gonna set the emission to white first here, and let's set it to pink, and I think that should be good. Yeah. So let's change this color as well. Let me just set it to something, I don't know, an orange, I guess. Yeah, maybe a red. And let's set the emission strength to 1 as well, and let's set this color to red as well. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, because we are actually seeing some reflection on this, and I think that makes it look much better. Okay, so let's before we continue with the materials, let me just add a background real quick. Okay, I'm just gonna add a mesh, which is gonna be a plane. Let's get out of our rendered mode. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be moving it back, and let's rotate it in the y-axis exactly 90 degrees, and let's just scale it up. Yeah, so that's going to be our background. So exactly, that's going to be our background, and now you're going to see that it looks pretty good. However, we are obviously going to give the background a color. So what I was thinking is that let's do a light blue. How about that? Let's see how it looks. So that is way too bright for the background because it's catching too much attention. How about we make it darker? Probably. Nope, not darker. Let me just give it a very light color. I think that should be good. Let me just let it render for a minute, and then we're going to see how it looks. So to these nose, I'm going to give it the same material as the skin, and to these eyes, let me just get out of my render mode. It's way too slow. Just save your project, by the way. And to these, I'm going to create a new material. I'm just going to make it black. Well, not full black. I'm going to make it something like that. Like it should be almost black basically. And I'm going to reduce the roughness as well. Okay, perfect. Let's actually increase the size of these eyes because to make them more visible. And so we're going to have to reposition these as well. And let's just shade them smooth as well. Let's shade this smooth as well. And I think we should be good to go. Yeah, now let's actually to these, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give them I'm just going to select a random material. Why not just give them this material, because it's a robot. It's not a human that should have perfectly like good lips and good eyebrows and everything. Anyways, so yeah, let me just give this material something like that. How about that? Yeah, I think that should be good. Now let's render it and let's see how it looks. So I'm just going to turn these viewport guides off for now so that we can actually see how the final render is going to look. So I'm not satisfied with the eyes because it's first of all, it's way too dark. I'm going to make it slightly gray, and I'm going to increase the roughness a little bit because we're seeing way too clear reflections on these. I don't want them to be too clear. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. And apart from that, let's select these earrings. I'm going to turn these viewport guides on again. And let's add this yellow material to these as well. I'm going to go back to the viewport shading mode. And I'm just going to add the skin material to these as well. And as you can see, the texturing part is pretty easy, isn't it? And to these, let's just, I don't know. Let's give, nope, yellow doesn't look good. Let's give them purple. Because why not? No, actually, let's give them the red. Let's give them the red color. Oops, not that. Let me select this and let's give these the helmet material. I think that should look pretty good. And I think we are done with the texturing, right? So let's just render it and let's make some tweaks to the materials if we don't like them. So I'm just going to let it render for a minute and I'll see when it's done. Yeah, so it has rendered a bit and I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? So I'm just going to be tweaking the what do you call it, this skin material slightly. I'm just going to go to this mode and let's set it to, let's maybe something like that, a more pinkish material, maybe something like that. Let me just change the hue. I think something like that should be good. Saturation should be something like that, and I think it is looking pretty good, doesn't it? I kind of want to change the background a little bit because it's way too what do you call it, it's way too light for now. I'm just going to select that and I'm going to add a new material to this. Let's how about we add some like extremely bright material to this. How about we add a dark blue, because why not? Nope, that is not looking good. I'm sorry for doing that. How about we do a red? Nope, not that either. How about we do a yellow? Yeah, a yellow should be good, shouldn't it? I think a yellow should be good. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with that. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Okay, so I think we are also good with the background. Let's make it slightly less vibrant because it's catching too much attention. And your background shouldn't be that attention grabbing. Oops, I'm not going to go with yellow because it's going to be the same color as this and it's going to make that look very bad. So I'm just going to, how about we go with the light blue? Yeah, I think that looks pretty good as well. Yeah, so I'm going to go with that. Perfect. Okay, cool. So everything is basically done and I think we are good to go. But one thing which I'm going to do is that we're going to go to these render settings, and here we're going to go down to this color management. And what we can do here is that we can change this. First of all, just make sure that your view transform is filmic. If it's standard or anything else, it's going to look terrible. Just make sure that it's filmic and the look should be medium high contrast, okay? Or you can go to high contrast as well. In this specific render, I think high contrast is much better. And yeah, it's really making our render pop out a little bit. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Apart from that, yeah, I think everything else is basically good to go. Let me just do one thing. Let me just go back to my viewport shading mode. And let me just select these eyes as these, sorry, what do you call them? Ears. And these earrings. And I'm going to increase the scale slightly. because why not? Yeah, I think that should be good. So let's just go back to our camera, let's render it, and I think if it looks good in this render, then I think we're just gonna go with it. Okay, so I kind of don't like this orange anymore. It kind of looks a little gross. How about we do a light pink? A slightly more bright pink, something like that. Let me just render and let's see how it looks. I think that's much better. That's much better, yeah. But we can obviously change it to other colors as well. How about we do a green, because we haven't really used a green in this render so far. How about a yellow? No. I think I'm just gonna go with a pink, something like that. Should be good. Okay, so what I usually like to do once I'm done with the texturing and everything, I like to change my HDRI, and I like to see which one looks the best. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to my HDRI and let's just change it. Let's just try, I don't know, home 1, I guess. And usually what happens in this is that I see some really major changes, and so, no, that doesn't look good, by the way. I see some really major changes, and I usually end up changing my HDRI after we've done the whole texturing. I think that looks better, doesn't it? Yeah. But the contrast is really high, so we can just change this to medium high contrast. Something like that should be good. Yeah, I think I prefer that actually. Let's just try other lighting as well. Let's try studio. If this doesn't look good, then we're gonna go with that home 2. I think it was home 2, or was it home 1? I don't remember. I'm just gonna check which one was it. Yeah, this doesn't look that great either, so I'm just gonna go with home 2. Yeah, home 2. Okay, so let me just render it. And and by the way, I'm just going to be attaching all these HDRIs which I used in the project section of this class, so that you guys can download it and you guys can use whichever you think looks the best, or you can obviously just download another one from HDRI Haven or any other website you want. So I'm just going to bring this down slightly, and I think we are good to go, aren't we? Yeah. So one thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to be reducing the Y slightly. Let me just do that. Let me just reduce the Y slightly. Something like that should be good, I think. Yeah. Let me just make it 1920 because so that it's a square render. Actually, yeah. So one thing which we can do is that oops, if I go back to my camera and if I lock this view again, I can zoom in slightly. So the way we can do that is by just pressing this button and moving forward slightly, and now we can just bring it down. I think that's going to be a better frame, isn't it? Because it's like more zoomed in and it's more efficient. I'm just going to unlock this, and I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, the render turned out to be pretty good, and yeah, I don't think it's centered properly. I'm going to lock it again. Let's just make sure that it's centered, and let's give it a final render. And apart from that, I think it'll turn out pretty good. Yeah, so I'm just going to go to my render properties, and here we can first of all go to this render settings and make sure that denoise is turned on and the denoiser is set to open image denoise, because that's basically the best of them all, and it gives you the best results. And this render what do you call them, the render max samples, I'm just going to set it to say, I don't know, 1000, because why not? Yeah, 1000 should be good. And apart from that, basically the higher the samples are, the more time it's going to take to render. However, the less noisier your image is going to be. But since we're using a denoiser as well, I think 1000 should be good enough. I'm just going to save it one more time, and yeah, I think we are good to go. And let's just press render, and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so I'm just going to press render image, 3, 2, 1. Let's do this. And yeah, so it's rendering, guys, and I'll see you when it's done. Alright guys, so it has finally finished rendering, and yeah, so to actually save this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to image, save as, and you can save it wherever you want. I'm just going to name it SS character 01, so Skillshare character 1, and yeah, so it's saved. Now if I just go to my what do you call it, Blender work, you're gonna see that we have SS character 1 here, which is perfect. I'm just gonna open it. Perfect, cool. So yeah, now we could obviously post process this, and we could obviously what do you call it, edit the colors and everything. We can do this here as well, but I don't think that's gonna make that much of a difference, because it already does have a lot of vibrance and a lot of contrast and everything. So I don't think we need to do anything much. So why is it not opening? I'm just gonna give it a minute. Yeah, okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to adjustments. Now you can use any editing software for this, obviously, but I'm just using the default Photos editing software. So the contrast, let's just increase it slightly to make the colors pop even more. And the exposure, let's just increase it a tad bit. And the color, we're gonna be, let's try the tint. Let's set the tint to a little, like, the thing is, right now on 0 it looks kind of greenish, to be honest. Let's give it a more warm vibe. So something like that should be good. Actually, I'm going to increase it a little more. Something like that should be pretty good. Let's change the warmth. Yeah, I think it's good where it is. I'm just going to set it to 0. And the clarity, we could obviously increase this to give it more more definition. But I'm actually going to decrease it because we want it to be a very dreamy render, a very cartoony and stylistic render. So yeah, that's going to be it. And the vignette, we are going to be adding some vignette, just a tad bit. Something like that, and I think that should be good. So I'm just going to increase the contrast slightly. Something like that should be good. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And I'm just going to save a copy so that we can actually compare these. And I'm just going to save it. Character 1, edited. So we can actually compare these and see which one looks better. So I'm just going to open this one right here. This is the edited one. And this is the non-edited one. I'm just gonna move these. Okay, so this was before and this is the after, so you can see it's a huge difference. And yeah, now obviously we could use a professional software like Adobe Lightroom like Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop or like Snapseed or anything like that, but I don't think we really needed that, because you can like use any basic 3D basic editing software, and you can even go to the internet and you can go just photo editor online. And I've actually used one of these. Yeah, PhotoArt, I think it was this. Basically, these are free photo editing softwares, and you can use these to just change your post process your renders. So yeah, you can use anything you want. Apart from that, I think we are done with this tutorial. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you have any problem in any part of the tutorial, just be sure to start a discussion down below, and I'll be sure to help you. And yeah, apart from that, just thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Alright guys, thanks a lot for watching the preview of this course. Now I really hope you're enjoying this course so far, and if you want to watch the rest of this course, it is on Udemy. It is paid, unfortunately. However, you can find a really good discount if you go to the link in the description. Now unfortunately, YouTube does not really pay that much, and making these videos takes a lot of effort and time, so I do have to make these videos paid for now. But yeah, hopefully in the future I will consider making free videos as well. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and if you go to the link in the description, you will be supporting this channel as well. See ya.